Well, good evening and welcome to our 2023 primary election night coverage. We are live from Diamond Park here in Meadville, Pennsylvania. Luke Rio, Jack Lynch, Mark Heim, and we have many others getting ready to join us here this evening. And it's going to be a big night, an exciting night to be out. The weather has been absolutely beautiful today, and we're going to talk about that and maybe how that plays a role in getting out to vote. Again, welcome to Diamond Park. Luke Rio, Jack Lynch with you here, and it's been a beautiful day, and hopefully you had a chance to get out and vote today. There's a lot of races that we're going to be watching here tonight. Again, it's just a primary, but it's going to give us a sneak peek at what we're going to be looking at for the general election this November. Just a reminder, polls are going to be closing in an hour, or less than an hour now, so you have until 8 p.m. If you haven't made it out, there's still a chance to get out and vote. And there's a lot of time to get out and do that. We know that these elections turnout can be a little bit lower than on a presidential or even during the general. But these races are so important. We'll talk about that coming up in just a little bit. Speaking of those races, Jack, let's kind of get an overview of what we're looking at here tonight. We're going to start with the Crawford County Commissioner race. Well, there you go. You've got a handful on the Republican side. On the Democrat side, Christopher Seeley and running unopposed. However, what we don't have on the list are all the write-ins. There is a write-in for county commissioner on the Democrat side, and that's Mr. Sherman Allen. And we'll talk about the write-ins here a little bit later. So as we go through the list, next coroner is another race we're going to be keeping an eye out on. 3 Republicans running there. You're voting for one.
For an open seat.
Yep. Auditor. Here's another one. And we'll get into the specifics here in just a little bit, but we'll quickly run through these races that we're watching. Now, there's a lot of races that we're not going to have a graphic for, but we're still going to talk about tonight. We've got all night to discuss it. We're going to get into school districts, I believe. Is that correct, Adam? Crawford Central School District. Look at that. You're voting for 5 there for a 4-year term. That's incredible. We're going to have a lot of time to discuss that. Next, Pencrest School District. Again, you're voting for 5. That's for a 4-year term. Titusville Area School District. You're voting for 5 there. There's a bunch who have cross-filed, and you can see that up on the screen. Now we're going to go to the city of Meadville. This is a big race, 4-year term. You got 2 candidates on the Republican ticket, 2 on the Democrat ticket. And again, it's a primary, so you're voting for your party right now, and these are the candidates we'll see in the fall. And then Titusville City Council. This is what's interesting here. There's a lot of write-in candidates for Republican side of the slate for Titusville City Council. Gavin S. Griffin, I do want to mention Gavin, the only one to get signatures to appear on the ballot. He is 19 years old, just finished his first year at Mercyhurst University. So he was a member of the junior councilman program, and there you go. He decided he wanted to run. He's getting into political science, so good for him. But he's on the ballot, and again, we'll discuss the write-ins a little bit later on. Again, we want to welcome you here to Diamond Park this evening. We are live, courthouse behind us. It is a beautiful, beautiful night. Let's bring in Mark Heim. Jack, Mark, beautiful weather.
Oh, you hit a home run.
People had no excuse not to go out and vote today.
Absolutely, you're very correct. But in a situation like this, in an off-year election, traditionally, even with good weather and not many excuses to, not cast a ballot, you're going to find a lot of people who will find it easier just to pass the voting booth by today. It's the big deal is going to be in November, and I guess that's when they figure they'll make their decisions. Many people, fortunately or unfortunately, consider the primary in an off-year election like this to be sort of a foregone conclusion and not much of a contest.
It's a good observation, Mark.
So.
Well, I mean, the thing about this is where the sausage is made in places like Crawford County. This is if you make it through today, everybody who ran for anything will tell you that if you make it through today, game's on in the fall. But one of the things I hope we can touch on, we see a slate of candidates, not surprisingly, for the commissioner's race. On the Democratic side, it's Chris is running unopposed, but I mean, look at the number of people that are running for school board, and we'll hopefully get into a little bit about that.
Yep.
I mean, that we talked a little bit off camera about what's driving that. Is it an academic issue? Is it a cultural issue? What's happening? I mean, I guarantee you there's going to be a lot of interest in those races. I mean, you get to places like school district and Conneaut School District, it's typical. You've got your 3, 4, 5 candidates vying for 5 seats, but these are extraordinary. And these are extraordinary times. So we do have some folks coming by. Hopefully they'll tell us what they're seeing in the polls, look at the numbers, what's happening out there, were you busy, were you not. And we put it out there too as well to the folks that both parties are welcome to come in. We should try to get a comment or two from the party chairs. Democratic headquarters is right across the Diamond Park, and we'll be visiting you from time to time. And here's the thing. I'll be the one to say it. If you're not here to talk, we'll be here to talk about you.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're looking forward to it. I'm just happy they let us out of the studio for this. And as you said, it's a beautiful night to be here, and there is so much to discuss, Jack. And Mark, kind of as you're saying,
Right.
people are like, it's the primary. Jack, why is it important to get out and vote in a primary?
It's everything, Luke. I mean, we talk about off-year elections. We talk about what's important. The old saying, all politics are local, is really true. I mean, this is the only chance you really have to take a look at all the candidates. A lot of people put into this, but I mean, the reality of it is this shapes what happens, right? These folks, there's a disparity of opinion typically, right? You get a lot of people that run on single issues, whether it's the county assessment or the care center. I'm talking about the commissioner's race. Those are important things. Those matter down the line. And, the people that are in the school districts and they're talking about curriculum, or the people that are behind us in the commissioner's office dealing with assessments or care center, it's the health of the folks in some level. It's certainly your pocketbooks. And one thing I'd like to point out is the interplay between the city right across the street and the county is there's a lot of common issues. Assessment, that we'll talk a little bit about that in terms of what that means for the city if you're a city resident or a city business owner versus somebody, say, in Troy Township. These matter immensely. And I'll tell you something else. If you're in the business community and you're looking to cite and you're looking at what drives the local economy, one of the first places you stop and take a look is who's in charge. Who's in charge of this place?
This is all local. These are all local issues, of course. And you just mentioned
100%.
that, all politics is local.
Mm-hmm.
But how much of what we see at election time, maybe more at the general election time, but is there some sense that, the election may be the only tool some people have to have a say on what's going on in politics in general? For instance, if somebody is not terribly enamored with one or the other of the two major parties, is this an opportunity to weigh in somehow? Oh,
100%. I mean, absolutely. You get a bunch of viewpoints in the primary. I mean, if you think back, Mark, when Trump ran, nobody was talking about the border. Nobody. And then all of a sudden they all had to address that big Republican field, had to talk about the border security, the fence, all these different things. So, I mean, the dialogue that drives the primary will carry through. And if people are paying attention, if there's a hot button issue that is important to you as a business owner or somebody with a kid in school, in a school district, you're going to pay attention to what people are saying. So you can get a candidate that says, I have an issue with this, and they keep talking about it. You've got to respond. You've got to respond to what's going on. So that's going to be an interesting thing, and I know we'll talk a little bit about that and what's kind of driving this race, what's driving the people. You got some incumbents, you got some challengers. And the other thing about the race behind us is fairly typical. You've got Republicans with unopposed in some of the row offices, but you've got an interesting commissioner race as well. But you've got a couple interesting folks back that are going to be running. You always talk about the farm vote. You had the Ivan Roses of the day, and Francis, of course, you could say we don't really have the traditional guy with a herd that's running, a dairy herd that's running this time. So
No.
That's going to be an interesting thing, and I think that the candidate that sort of has spoken to that constituency and speaks to their, what their concerns are, it's real, and everybody votes. As we used to say, East Mead, everybody votes. We'll see how that turns out. We may be in for a surprise or two. We'll see.
Jack, the other thing I want to ask you about is if you go to meetings, there's certainly the world that's happening within those meetings, right? So this goes back to what does it cost to get people out to vote?
Right.
So if I'm sitting at home and I have no idea, I'm not paying attention to what's going on, how do I know that this is a hot button topic? How do I know that this is an issue that everybody's talking about? What's going to drive me to get out and go to the polls and vote?
Boy, what a good question. I think if you're not going to...
And is it up to the people helping out with those campaigns to help get that message out?
100%. Your team. It's all about the kind of teamwork you have. And here's the other thing, the geographic disparity between what's going on in, say, the Shenangos versus Titusville. It's almost like two different worlds.
Yeah.
When you think about it, Luke, I mean, you've got issues that there's commonality, there's common features, but, to somebody who's a farmer, and we went to the Republican dinner a couple weeks ago, there's a lot of concern in terms of what's affecting and impacting our agricultural industry here, particularly in Crawford.
And while you talk about that, Adam, I want you to bring up the commissioner graphic for us real quick. And to your point here, Jack, I mean, look, Summerhill Township, Westmead Township, Cochranton. If you're in, say, Titusville, Lionsville, what's drawing you to say, oh, yeah, I got to get out and do that. I got to go out and support this candidate? Or how come we're not seeing more candidates from the outskirts?
That's a good question. It varies every year. We've had certainly candidates from Titusville that have done very well.
Centerville
area,
Jack
absolutely.
Preston.
So, I mean, Jack Preston was, a fixture for many, many years. Eric, of course, it's second from the bottom up. Eric is an incumbent. He had a pretty strong campaign. Eric's from Westmead. He has very strong opinions. He's well-spoken. I'll say one thing about Mr. Henry, Commissioner Henry. You know where he stands. I think people appreciate that. The interesting dynamic here is you've got Scott Schell, who was the coroner for many years, I think 4 terms. Correct me on that. Scott hails from Cochranton. The name's probably not as familiar as being the coroner as, say, the sheriff or something. But that's going to be interesting because that opens up that seat to the 3 folks that are running for it. And then you've got Todd Seipel. Todd's been here for quite a few years. He's in the maintenance department. He's more meets the eye with Todd. We'll see how this turns out. I happened to hear that Todd has reached out to the what we'll call the farm vote for the purposes of this, and that's going to be an interesting dynamic that's going to play out. I don't know Brenda that well, but then you've got from the Summerhill area, it's sort of that western part of the county. I don't know what issues are driving the folks up there, but I would say as well that the folks that are in the rural enclaves will cleave to the folks that are addressing their issues or at least spoken to them, and they listen.
Well, I would think that a more universal issue that will probably drive everybody would be what hits you in the pocketbook,
You think?
Well, if there's ever a time to raise taxes with what we've gone through the last year with inflation, this was sort of that opportunity. But you've heard a lot of people say, hey, we're not going to raise taxes and we're going to hold the line. But we do know their costs have gone up as well. So
100%.
We'll have to kind of explore that thought later tonight as well. Another race that we didn't bring up that we are going to be watching is Venango County commissioners. Mark, again, this is kind of interesting in regard to Sam Breen, the incumbent on the Republican side, Chipper Bramovic, incumbent on the Democrat side, running against a well-known name, Matthew Beath, I believe from Franklin. You've got Bill Moon, who's the current mayor of Oil City, running. Now, my understanding is he's going to be moving out of the city this year, which means he's ineligible to be mayor.
Mayor, exactly.
This was an opportunity for him. So, again, that's a race that we'll kind of keep an eye out on as well. Again, busy night. We're looking forward to sitting down with a lot of folks here this evening and just exploring all these topics and more, Jack. Again, we've got a lot to go over from commissioner races, corner, and again, some that we don't have graphics for, but that we still want to talk about. District Attorney, Register and Recorder, Prothonotary. You've got Mr. Hunter taking on Ms. Arnett. That's going to be a big race. Sheriff. It seemed like we just got done talking about the sheriff race, and you've got Dave Powers, who's on the ballot for that, and his name will move forward to the fall. Again, everything today we're gearing up for the fall, which towards the end of the night, we'll kind of get into what things are going to look like. I want to kind of just quickly ask, what are the expectations tonight in terms of what we're going to know? You've got mail-in ballots. You've got all sorts of write-ins going on in a couple of these races. It's going to take time, and credit to the commissioners. They're not rushing this process through with everything that's been brought up the last 4 years with voting and
100%.
making sure every vote counts. You've got two, because Eric's running. He's not going to be in the courthouse, but you have 2 and everybody involved helping to make sure that every name is tallied properly. So what are the expectations for tonight?
I think that, as always, we're we're going to have an inkling at least of how it's going to turn out. Whether or not the mail-in ballots, whether or not any other kind of ballot is going to have a major effect on this, we're probably not going to see, probably for about a week or so. You know yourself, it usually takes about a week to certify or more, maybe 10 days or so to certify all of these things, and all of these things have to be checked and double-checked. As we mentioned, or as I mentioned to you perhaps as we were going on the air, someone who may be very astute with the numbers and the political situation may be able to do some forensic arithmetic in their heads and kind of figure these things out. But it's kind of like a card player knowing what's in somebody else's hand. It's going to be difficult unless you're, really that good of a strategist to know the numbers. I think it's going to be, we'll have a good idea of how things are going to be in the fall by the time we leave tonight. But we're not going to know for sure, for a good 7 to 10 days.
Well, we're going to ask somebody who is going to know, or at least provide a better idea here.
Backdrop.
Yeah, in just a few moments here, we're going to bring Commissioner Christopher Soff on, and we'll find out. What are their expectations tonight? We'll learn about that. Real quick, going back to the marketing, it's amazing. We were setting up for tonight's broadcast. Again, we're in beautiful Diamond Park. We're setting up the broadcast, and we had a lot of people say, "Oh, what are you doing? What's going on?" And we'd say, "Oh, we're getting ready for election coverage tonight." Oh, that's it, and then leave. It's like they weren't interested in taking part in it, or maybe just election fatigue or politics fatigue. Does that play a role?
Just hope they didn't go to get some rotten apples to throw.
Well, I said we're going to be here till 11.
Well, you're in luck. There's no vegetable stands around here.
So just a couple quick things about what Mark was talking about the general direction of what to expect. I think you'll get those contours, right? I mean, we won't know, for example, if certain folks that are mounting these write-in campaigns have surmounted the 100 signature mark or whatnot. We won't have any sense of that, but we'll hopefully have a sense of where the landscape's going. These races are critically important. Obviously, the commissioner's race, Chris, and the city race is very interesting. That's going to be a real interesting dynamic that's going to play out here. Hopefully, we find something out. The city's one of the first folks to drop their bags off, and so there's some numbers coming out of that. So let's get a sense of things and see what happens.
There's a pretty good mix in Meadville as well.
Absolutely.
Both parties are very active.
100%.
Well, let's welcome Crawford County Commissioner, Mr. Christopher Soff, here
Good to
tonight.
see you.
How are you?
Hey,
Very
Chris.
good, everybody.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Well, should we ask him?
Yeah, I think you should.
Okay.
Put it to him.
Do I have to answer?
No, not at all. Not at all.
You've only got a few months left, so you can speak your mind.
First of all, what are the expectations today? This is a long night.
Yes.
But what are the expectations for voters? When should they start seeing numbers? What's the reality of where we are today with mail-ins and all the write-ins that we're seeing today?
So the first drop of election results will probably occur around 9:30. Of course, polls close at 8. There will be some cleanup on the part of the poll workers to get everything packed up. And then they'll bring their election result cards back to the courthouse. Our folks will, upload those numbers. And the first drop to the state and then to the county website will probably be around 9:30. And then periodically as we go out through the evening.
Okay, so they can go to the county website and
Yes.
start monitoring
Yes,
that information.
absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
How weird is it not to be on the ballot?
Weird in a good way, I would say. How about that?
Oh, no.
This is my 22nd year of being an elected official. First from Crawford Central School Board, 4 years on Meadville City Council, 6 years as the mayor of the city of Meadville. I'm in my 8th year as a county commissioner. So I'm honored and blessed as I've been to serve, but just as happy to enter the next season of my life, whatever that's going to be, starting January 1st. Still some time between now and then, but still
Chris,
some work to be done. But
have a plan.
I
bet you.
The plan is not to sit in front of the TV. I will tell you that.
Hey,
things I want to do.
No offense to those watching us tonight.
I'm starting Stream TV that I'm thinking if you know anybody who would.
The Western County
the
Division.
Western County part. No.
There you go.
I'm sure that I will be busy doing something. Thank you.
Hey, Chris, one quick question I think it's on my mind. When you were across the street in City Hall, I was sitting behind us. What is in your, because you wore both hats for a long time and effectively. What were the biggest, what's the critical difference between the two roles? I mean, we get the city jurisdiction. What did you find to be the most challenging, say, transition to make, or wasn't there one?
I think it was different. Because with the city, your jurisdiction is streets and the landscape of the city and emergency services that the city provides, that type of thing. And the county is different. That doesn't mean we still don't get calls that say, hey, my road's in terrible shape.
Right.
What are you going to do about it? And respectfully, we say, well, contact your township supervisors, contact, your city government, that type of thing. I think the general feeling is that because county government is viewed as a larger body of government, anything that happens in Crawford County is under the purview of the commissioners.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, right.
having sat there,
Right.
it's just not. And that's because
right.
Pennsylvania government is very fractured.
Yep.
There are just a lot of levels to it. And most people just don't need anything that would cause them to have to understand what all those levels are. So they immediately think, well, it happened in my county. Well, I must have to go to the commissioners to solve that problem.
I have two questions for you. You brought up, hey, call your township supervisor and find out. There's a lot of empty spots here on the ballot.
There are.
What do you say to folks who have thought about it but just say, you know what, I don't want to get involved in politics. I don't want to have to deal with that on social media or whatever.
I would say that I have tried to never get involved in politics either, because when you say he's a politician, you never say it in a good way.
Right.
That's not usually a compliment. I
Right.
mean, so
It's
we
true.
try to say, you know what, I'm in government. I have to be part of the political process in order to be an elected official. But I think when people hear that you're in politics, they think, okay, he or she is saying something that they really don't believe. They're really not looking out for me, the constituent. So we really don't. We try not to use the P word. But if you genuinely care for your area, whether it's your city, your borough, your township, your county, get involved. I may not say make the leap immediately to an elected official. Learn how your area works first. Serve on a board.
That's a good
Serve on
point.
an authority.
Yep.
Yeah.
Serve on something that allows you the opportunity to be out in your area and see people and talk with them. But if an elected office is something that you aspire to, great. That the sad part is, in my opinion, we have become a society that uses social media for some good, obviously, but for a lot of not good.
It's a cudgel.
Misinformation,
Yeah.
disinformation, that you can say something and walk away. And these things take on lives of their own, and it's really counterproductive to us achieving the good things that we want for our areas. And that's unfortunate, in my opinion.
By the way, that's the description for the next 4 hours on this. So, I mean, good job.
I'm happy that I could help.
Go ahead, Mark.
It's just like it seems to be a matter of time and effort too for a lot of people. Folks that I've talked to feel in a lot of cases they've got their own household to run,
Yep.
their own families to take
Yep.
care of, and taking on even a board position somewhere. It's extra reading, it's extra study, it's an extra night during the week, things like that. And folks, while they may be interested, may not want to become involved just because of the time and the effort.
Sure.
That's
And you're right. I would say that the same 24 hours have been in a day for as long as I can remember. And what do we do with those 24 hours? If we value being part of moving a community forward and we're willing to put in the time and effort to serve on those boards and authorities, to seek an elected office, that's wonderful, and we need those. What we are finding is fewer and fewer people are making those choices, I think in part because of what we do and what we say about elected officials. Doesn't mean you have to agree with the decisions they make all the time, but the manner in which we just are not kind to them, and we feel as if they always have an ulterior motive, and this sense that, oh, they must be sitting there thinking of ways that they can make my life more difficult. Well, that's not true at all. We're all after trying to make our communities more vibrant, more productive, make our constituents happier with the place where they call home or where they work. And so for us, it's that's what drives us. And we need that drive to be in other people so that they can continue to do these things. And I said earlier to someone that, the county survived 200 years before I got here, and they'll survive long after I'm gone. So it's just important that we continue to have folks who are willing to take the risks and to look someone in the eye and say, you know what, I agree with that, or I'm sorry, I don't agree with that, and here's why. Mm-hmm. And if you have a better way to do something, tell me, show me, help me be part of that good thing that you think we need.
To their credit, when I covered news more actively, I came to know a couple of city council representatives in Oil City who were moved enough to come to council and serve at least one term. But honestly, the one man with whom I was really good friends with, in fact, he was a neighbor of mine, told me when he was no longer with council, he told me that, if I had known what was involved, I probably would not have done it.
Sure.
But you don't know those things until you step on board. He decided to take the risk, as you mentioned, and found out that it was much more, than he thought he could handle.
It's the iceberg analogy. If all you do, in my opinion, is watch our 40-minute meetings every Wednesday or something like that, and you think you know how the county operates, boy, what you're seeing is just such a small part of what it takes to effectively operate county government with the assistance of all the department heads and all the other elected officials and that kind of thing.
That's well spoken. I mean, it's true. And that's often scripted. I mean, people come in with, grant applications that you've talked about. And so, like, what is all this stuff? These guys come in and they just get these things approved. Yeah. It's been talked about. It's been vetted. It's been to a work session. That kind of thing.
Well, I think the other thing it made me think of is when you are watching these forums and people are trying to tell you about the job, obviously they've never had that job before. And I think I know a couple of you sat in for almost a year
at least, yes.
With before you were put on the board, to know what was going on, to have an idea. You didn't know everything,
right?
But you had a pretty good idea. It's hard to run for a position and say this is what I'm going to do, this is what I'm going to do, when you don't know if that's what you can do.
I tried very strongly not to say when I get there, if I'm blessed enough to be that elected official, I'm going to do this or I'm going to do that, because you do quickly realize that whether it's because of statute or finances or whatnot, you can't do all of the things that you think maybe you should be able to do and that you want to do. You have to work within the framework of your code, but it's much different when you're in there, but it's still worth it. I will say to anybody who's considering it, it's still worth it.
Well,
you can make a difference.
Absolutely, you
100%.
can.
Yeah, from city council, from school board to city council to county commissioner. Mr. Christopher Soff will be wrapping up his term at the end of the year. Thank you for your service, and thanks for all you do, and we appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you
so much.
Chris.
It's been an honor for me. Thank you.
What we're going to do is we're going to pause for just a few moments. We're going to bring in a few other guests here tonight. And we, again, want to welcome you to our live coverage, primary election coverage here. We are live from Diamond Park in Meadville, Pennsylvania. It's just an absolute beautiful
Stunning
day. Beautiful, beautiful. And we're going to be here till 11 o'clock talking to a lot of people. And if you're somebody who's on this candidates list, and you haven't heard from us, well, come on down to Diamond Park. We'd love to chat with you. We're going to be talking to a lot of people here. Polls close at 8. You have about another half hour, so get to the polls and vote. What's turnout been like?
We're going to find out.
We are. Coming up as our election coverage continues here on Armstrong's Neighborhood Channel and on Stream Television. Back after this. And welcome back. We are live from Diamond Park in beautiful Meadville, Pennsylvania. It is the 2023 primary election coverage here tonight on Stream Television and on Armstrong's Neighborhood Channel. Before we continue on with some new guests here this evening, a couple thanks. We want to thank the city of Meadville. We also want to thank the great food, Mike and crew at Pizza Villa. Jack, first of all, when I mentioned your name, there was some screaming, but they settled down and they said, yes, we'd love to bring some pizza over. So Mike and company, thank you so much. We're actually going to show you some of the pizza. Don't forget to support them. Maybe you want to watch all of our election night coverage tonight. You know what sounds good to go with that? Pizza or subs or something from Pizzaville. You can go visit them. They are, of course, in Meadville, and they'll be open till 9 o'clock tonight. And we'll talk more about them coming up a little bit later on. So thanks to Mike and crew. And again, the entire staff over at the city of Meadville, big thank you to them and our crew, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. But first, we have some new folks joining the panel we want to bring in. Again, Jack Lynch sitting next to me. I'm Luke Rio. We've got Mark Heim. We've got Mr. Fred Smith and Mr. Jay Verno joining us here this evening. Gentlemen, good to see you, and welcome to Election Coverage 2023. Primary election. Jay, let's start with you. You've been at one of the polling locations today. What location were you at? And
Vernon 3.
Vernon 3. What's typical for Vernon 3?
Well, I guess it depends really on whether you're talking about an off-year election or not. Obviously, it's a primary, so I've only gotten involved in the primary elections a couple times, honestly.
Yeah.
When you're coming up and you have a business to run and you have family obligations and some of the other things that I've been involved in. I haven't always gotten as involved in the primary elections, especially boots on the ground. In other words, being at the polling places, those kinds of things. Obviously, my first introduction was back in Jack's campaign, and that was a really good experience. But I seem to remember that being in my mind, I don't know, maybe it was colder, maybe it was wetter, but we had a beautiful day, and you can tell by the sun on my face that I didn't even think about the sun because I'm not ever out that long.
Or you're enjoying retirement.
Well, that's the other thing.
Yeah.
That's the other thing.
So you're somebody obviously that continues to monitor what's going on. If especially if people know you on Facebook or friends with you, you're posting things all the time from all over the county, really keeping an eye on what's going on. Are you amazed that more people aren't taking an interest in some of the things that are being discussed or shared?
I don't know that I'm amazed. There's part of me that's, I get it. I understand that when you are working your job, having your family obligations and other things go on, politics is not necessarily the top of your top 5 list of what's most important to you, right? So I get that. One of the reasons why I'm as involved as I am, is at least letting people know what's going on, is that I do have time to do that now. I always had an interest in it, but now I feel like I actually know more about what's happening. Again, and you mentioned countywide, even a little bit more on statewide. I have friends and family that live in Pittsburgh, friends and family that live up in Erie. And certainly for me, the Pennsylvania election of 2020 was, to me, not a good look for Pennsylvania for lots of reasons. Okay, but at the end of the day, the state is what the state is. I always have focused on my local area, whether it be city of Meadville, Vernon Township. Now I live out at Conneaut Lake, so I have an interest in the whole county. I had a lot of customers, a lot of friends throughout the county. And for me, I think more people at least need to be aware. Now, that doesn't mean they have to get involved, doesn't mean they have to get passionate and do everything, but they should at least be aware of the issues facing the county, because we need smart people to come up with some of these solutions. Right. Politicians, as public servants, they can only do what they're aware of. So if somebody has a better idea, and Christoph, I think, said it pretty well. If there's somebody that can show them a better way to do things, you need to share that with the appropriate public servant. Again, going to county government for City of Meadville streets issue is not the right place.
Right.
But there are things that people that have studied, or maybe they come from another area and they say, hey, where I used to live, we did this to solve this problem. One of the big issues for me right now is I am really, really concerned about our EMT crisis and what I see as the storm clouds in the distance, and
which is affecting everybody across the country.
Exactly.
Yes,
so
it is.
It's a nationwide problem that, for lack of a better word, because of our demographics and the aging of our population, it probably will hit us a little harder than some of the younger areas.
Yeah.
All right, I
It's
don't
a-
know. Maybe the numbers don't bear that out, but I would think that they would. And my thought is, there's time for people to get together and start really thinking this through about what are our possible solutions, and ultimately, how do we come up with a solution that works for Crawford County in Western Pennsylvania?
Jay, let me ask you a question. If you don't know, Jay was the Man of the Year last year, recognized by the Chamber, the Crawford County Western Chamber of Commerce. You've given a lot of yourself to the community, obviously the Mark, and other things through the years. You've been involved in a lot of things, more than just about anybody I know. Let me ask you a question. You're plugged in, you talk to people, you're at the polling place today. What do you think? I mean, there's some national issues that we talked a little bit earlier that are maybe shaping school races, for example, school board races, unprecedented numbers of candidates for school board. You know, it's amazing. What do you think, or do you think there's some national things that are driving some of these primaries, either at the county level? Obviously, we're voting on judgeships this time around, and the school boards. Do you see any tie-in to what you're seeing and your involvement in the community and talking to folks? Does that make sense?
Wow, that's a good question. It's kind of complicated because there's the national issues and how do they manifest in your local school district, right? I mean, for us, our schools, I think, on the whole, did a better job of, trying to manage and stay open as much as they could. I think a lot of our schools opened up sooner. At least the public, grade schools, K through 12. I think a lot of them opened up sooner than other areas of the state. So that, I think, was well received by the parents. I know myself as a grandparent, I know that one of the big issues that my kids had to face was the fact that, if school shut down and the daycare is the main provider of care for your kids,
Right.
if your daycare shuts down, now you're really stuck between a rock and a hard place. You're really stuck between making decisions about working or not, and you've got to make sure your kids are safe and well cared for. So, I mean, not for nothing, that has a bearing on, my wife for sure. I think retired a little earlier just because she felt that she needed to be there for her kids because of the grandkids, right? So that's kind of how that works out sometimes. So then you look at that and you say, okay, those policies and procedures that the schools adopted, and again, you can have adult conversations about whether that was right or wrong, or did they do it the right way? But at the end of the day, it is what it is. Now, going forward, I will say that there are parents who, for lack of a better word, maybe I'll use the word, took their eye off the ball in terms of what was happening or what wasn't happening in terms of kids and development and education issues. And I think a lot of parents are back to basics. I think they really want to get that lost year of learning back as quickly as they can.
So you see that as sort of shaping some of these school district races and the interest both on candidates and
I think again, it may be a little bit pie in the sky, but I think that parents are saying, hey, I need to be more involved, and I can't just kind of depend on someone else to make sure that my kids are made whole. Because like I said, I mean, I have a lot of friends and a lot of people in education, and they know that there was a pretty large learning loss that occurred. And, that is, I mean, it's tough enough to keep kids on track and I saw it year after year when, you get kids to a certain level at the end of the school year and then summer vacation. And if those kids don't get worked with as far as reading and, practicing things and doing things, there's a learning loss just in the summer months. Imagine taking that over a full year. Or if you go to distance learning, some kids honestly can handle it with no problem. Some kids literally fell off the cliff, in my opinion. They just couldn't handle that.
Well, let's do this real quick. We're talking about education. It makes sense to bring in Mr. Fred Smith, who is an educator with the Titusville Area School District. Fred, obviously there's probably a lot there to chime in on, but I also want to go back to when we had Christopher Soff on and having those discussions and civics. Do you see that as a missed opportunity in school, or are we missing that and it is being discussed in school?
It is being discussed in school, but the problem is, it's like algebra. If you don't use it, you lose it, and if people don't stay in touch with voting because we register kids to vote. We take them to work at the polls, and they see how that works up front and close. But if they don't continue with that, then it causes a problem. Some of it is, when kids go away to college or into the military or whatever, they get away from it distance-wise. But even kids that stay around in the workforce, they typically fall off the cliff when it comes to local governance in 18, 19, 20, and they often don't pick up interest until maybe they start having kids of their own. And so there's that gap of about a decade or so, I think, when you have a lot less participation. So it's definitely taught. We talk about the different levels of government, and we talk about the different offices that are elected, but it often gets lost after they graduate because they just don't have that connection, which is bizarre because we have more elections than anybody else in the world. We have 2 a year, every year. So you think it's always in the news.
You can't get away from it.
Yeah, and people, unfortunately, they mistake politics with governance, and the politics makes them disgusted, and they don't pay attention to the actual administration that happens. And it's most important at the local level because that has the biggest impact on our lives. And they see, a local primary, it's Republicans and Democrats. It's the same as the national scene, but it really isn't. I mean, once the petitioning and the primary process is over, it's really just about who's a better administrator of the local office. And I think a lot of people get scared away by the politics. And they, I think if they do have an interest, I don't want to use the word scare, but they're unfamiliar with what kind of work goes into it, which has two results. You have people that run and have this high list of demands. I'm going to make all these sweeping changes, which they often can't because they don't have the authority in those offices to do so. Or they believe that it's too daunting of a task, and they even though they might have an interest, they don't want to get involved with it. And so because that gap of voter apathy happens in their 20s, and because people don't feel that they can get involved in the process, a lot of time goes by before they actually become more active, I think, in voting 2 times a year. It's a relatively small group of us that are a part of the so-called political class that are voting every election and organize and get petitions signed and so on. It's relatively small in the United States.
Tiny.
Real quick, I just want to get your thoughts on this, and then maybe into what Jay was saying. Adam, let's pull up Crawford Central. These are the candidates running for Crawford Central School District. That's a lot of people running. You're voting for 5 there.
It's 27.
Incredible. Let's pull up Pencrest. Now, this is the district that I think everybody's familiar with because there's a lot going on at Pencrest. Again, a lot of candidates.
20.
Let's go to the Titusville real quick, and a lot of these folks have cross-filed, so you'll see names on both sides. We were talking earlier, Fred. It seems like Crawford, seems like Titusville, at least in this area, Franklin, Oil City, perhaps. They're doing a good job for now at keeping education at the forefront, where maybe Pencrest has allowed the door to be open to a lot of this other stuff that's been playing out there. I don't know what your take is on that, and what's next in terms of school boards.
It's kind of bizarre because you mentioned the pandemic and some of the leftover frustration that came out with it, and there was some of that in Titusville. There was 2, I think, hot button issues that came up over the last 4 or 5 years. One was the pandemic. We had crowds that showed up that were upset about the mask rules and things like that. And then, of course, when the Carter Field and other athletic facilities were renovated, we had a decent amount of people show up to voice their frustrations about that. But then when it wasn't this school board election, the one before that happened, there was enough people to run, and that was it. There was no mass amount of people that showed up in order to run against the incumbents. So it's kind of bizarre how that kind of leveled off and didn't result in some kind of radical challenge to the incumbents in Titusville, but it is in these neighboring school districts. And I think, like you mentioned, they have gotten swept up in some of these national issues, cultural issues, I think, which is bizarre. And I hope, no matter who gets on those boards, that they think of kids' education first, not just about their own values. I just posted something yesterday in Florida. There's a teacher who showed a film, and maybe he shouldn't have shown it or not. It was an animated film, and I think there was an LGBTQ character in it, and a kid in the class was a child of a school board member, and so they filed a complaint. And of course, in Florida now, teachers can be investigated for that, and so you see some validity to the parent's concern, but then the school board member, the parent, then said, we shouldn't be indoctrinating kids, and I have a right to bring up this complaint because I was put here by God. And it's like, well, it sounds like you're also trying to infuse your beliefs into this. So I think that's a problem when people get worked up, and it's not about education, but it's about just forcing your own beliefs. That becomes a little bit of a problem.
So to follow up with that point, so there's an unprecedented number of records. It's got to be close, right? They're running for these school boards. So your opinion is then you got the mission is to educate, and then you've got sort of this cross-pollination of a cultural issue that's driving the candidates, that's driving the discussion, and I think we think that's right? I mean, that's sort of what's. So your point is like, look, you run for school board for a certain reason. A lot of it's budget, right?
Yeah.
A lot of it's budget.
Yes.
A lot of it's mundane. And then you've got these sort of, I don't want to say fringe, but you've got these cultural issues that are driving the interest, and let me ask you this. The counterpoint to that is, doesn't that make people pay attention a little more, or do you think it's just noise that obfuscates the right people to do the relatively mundane tasks of government?
Yeah, it's fine if it gets a lot of people interested and it creates a healthy competition in the election. And once they get there, they sit there and they realize, oh, maybe things aren't what I thought, and it is mostly about the budget, and it's not about let's get to the library and comb through all the books and that kind of issues that come up. And so I think if they realize what the job is and they settle down, it's fine. But because actually, when people do get there and they have more of their own personal agenda, they burn out pretty quick because they don't want to go through the paperwork. They don't want to go through all of the committee meetings and stuff like that. So I think in a way, the marketplace of governance kind of works itself out most of the time.
Most of the time.
It's interesting, what causes folks to grab their torches and pitchforks, and they're all excited about it, and then the election happens, and then it just disappears. Jay, you look like...
Then the heavy lifting starts, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then the hard work starts.
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, I've never, ever really seen anybody that was a single issue candidate that really did it for the long term and did it, because they were passionate about that role. Mm-hmm. There are people for sure that have gotten into various positions and ran successful campaigns on a single issue. But generally speaking, they do tend to burn out. And again, that issue either goes away or they find that they can't really impact that particular issue.
Right.
So, like I said, most people that I know that are in it for the right reasons are running. Now, I will tell you, the way that things are today, you at least have to have a kind of a position. You have to answer those questions. I got asked today a couple of things. I was like, I don't know, that answer. I'm not the candidate, but, certainly I can pass on your questions to them. I think politics has gotten... I always thought that the job was very difficult, but I think the actual running for elections now, and really this used to be, you never saw this kind of thing too much in the local elections. I don't remember ever seeing this kind of truly divided, and people that, like I said, just for lack of a better word, they've been kind of programmed in a way that if they believe this, that they must be this way and this way. And I'm like, well,
How bad is it, though, whenever you hear something, the first thought is, okay, is that a Republican or Democrat standpoint? I mean, why are we thinking instead of, that's a good idea?
Yeah, well, sadly, I think media in general, and I'm not going to just blame social media. I think cable TV and social media for sure, and other medias that are out there tend to make it one or the other, depending on who they think that their intended audience is. So, again, I like to read lots of different things, and try to be mindful of both sides of an issue. It's hard anymore to find sort of a centrist perspective on things. It really is much more difficult, much more time consuming.
Generating heat seems to sell copy. I mean, that's the long and short of it.
Yeah, and that probably maybe that was the case back in the day, but it just seems like because we have so much more content coming at us on a daily, minute to minute, basis, that you're
Well,
going to get
and
that.
part of that problem is it's not really news in a lot of cases. You're seeing more opinion journalists, than anything else. And
Well,
what we're getting on the news cycle is more opinion.
It's a growth industry.
Yeah, exactly. So,
Billions and billions of dollars.
we used to, or the whole point of journalism was to bring certain things to light and allow people to make their own decisions. Now it's not so much that way. We're telling people what they should think and leaving it us to fact check.
Hey, we got to take a break here, real quick. Jay, percentage-wise, what would surprise you?
Turnout.
Turnout. What would surprise me? I think traditionally, we've been in the Jack, help me out here. On a primary, probably
Upper teens, mid.
15 to 20.
Yeah.
20 would be a pretty good turnout.
I'm going to say 15, maybe
Wow.
17. I think it'll be lower.
All right, and we'll continue this conversation right after this. Hour number 2. We're going to be going, 18 hours, I think, nonstop. We are live from Diamond Park in beautiful Meadville, Pennsylvania. It is primary election 2023. Luke Rio, Jack Lynch, we have Mark Heim, we have Fred Smith, and we have somebody new to our panel here this evening, and we're glad to see them. Mr. Bill Lawrence joins us.
Hi.
Bill, good to see you.
It's good to be here. Thank you.
So, Bill, you're a candidate.
Yes.
For Meadville City Council.
Correct.
At what point did you say, I need to step up and this is something I want to do? And by the way, polls are closed now.
Polls are closed, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So with the mayor election, when Marcy was going against Jamie, that's when I really started. I always paid attention a little, but that's when I really started paying attention to what was going on. And that's when I really started paying attention to everything our city council was doing and watching with how they treated the renters, how I feel like businesses are being treated, the direction that the city's going with the budget, with the overall optimism. It's not high enough. So I thought this is the time for me to jump in and do something. I always wanted to get into politics, but I thought it would be later in life. But I just felt like this was the right time. And so I decided to go for it.
So tell us a little bit about your background. You mentioned being a business owner.
Yeah, so I was born and raised in Meadville. And I started my gym I have right downtown on Park Avenue. I started that gym in 1999. So we're starting our 25th year next year.
Wow.
I moved away from Meadville for just 1 year. I lived in North Carolina after I graduated college and taught school. When I was gone, I came back up and visited my family for Easter. And when I was visiting them, the plan was, so I was dating my wife. I was dating my wife now, and she was finishing up college, and she was going to move to North Carolina with me. That was the plan. And I came up for Easter, spent time with my family, and I thought, I miss my family, I miss Meadville, I've missed this whole area. So I immediately changed plans. She was a great sport about it, and we moved back here. And that's when I opened the gym. We've been here ever since. So I love Meadville. I don't always love the weather of Meadville, but I love Meadville. And so I want to see what I can do, and I think I can make a difference and make it a better place.
Quick question for you. We actually talked about politics years ago. Remember?
Yeah.
Came in the gym. I knew there was a sparkle in your eye when you talk about it, or at least bring it up. So you never know when the right time is, but you know when it's time for you to make some bold moves. Running for anything is tough, right? You're a business owner. A lot of people know of you, Bill, like we've talked, off camera. So in your case, when you say like the business acumen and what the city, that's important. I mean, people vote with their feet. If your business ain't making it in Meadville, I'll go somewhere else or I'll move out. So it's always been the center. What specifically on the business side, as a business owner, do you see that the city could or should be doing better? What are you going to fight for?
I think it's all about the budget.
Okay.
The budget's the number one thing. If you don't have your budget under control, if you don't know where all your money's going and where you're getting your money and what you can spend money on, then nothing good can happen, because we all want nice parks. We all want all the extras, but we can't do things if we're broke. And I think that's the same way as running a business. It's like how I run my gym. We want to have nice equipment. We want to do things. Well, we can't do that if we can't pay the bills.
Right.
So first we have to take care of the basics, and then we can have more of the fun stuff. But it all starts with us taking care of the necessities.
So the budget and budgetary concerns.
That's number one.
Yeah.
It's the most important thing by far.
Right.
And ours, from what I understand, is completely out of control. So I want to get on there. I want to be on that committee, and I want to make a difference with that. Sure. I've always run my business with a solid budget. So I think the experience really helps. I think Marcy, who's also running on the Republican side, Marcy Kantz, she's run a successful business. So I think you put the two of us on there with Jim, I think you're going to see some great things.
So the budget being number one, and then as a business owner, I mean, it's the clientele. There's a lot of property in the city. We've always heard this, right?
Yeah.
There's property behind us, property across the street. They're off the tax rolls.
Yes, yes.
Allegheny College, everybody loves the college, but these places, sometimes they get a little like a payment in lieu of taxes or some kind of a donation of some sort, but that's a big hurdle.
It is.
You've got an aging housing class and stuff like that. So let me ask you this. In terms of revigorating the city and making it an attractive place to do commerce and live, do you have any thoughts on that? Because it's a tough battle.
I do. A couple of things. One, with the places that do not have to pay their property taxes, I think I can build an amazing relationship with those people. and I think we can work together to maybe get a little more. I feel really strongly about that. I can't say it for certain, but I feel really good about it. And then what it's all about is we get successful business owners right now to want to invest and put more of their time and money into Meadville. I mean, look at some of the great business owners that we have in this area that have been so successful.
Yeah.
And I want to bring them to the table. And that's what we should be doing, is talking with those people and say, hey, Meadville's been great to you. How can we all work together to make Meadville even better? And that's what I think we start building Meadville up and making it look, putting a nice shine on Meadville, making it look even better.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like you really want to have people take pride
Absolutely.
in where they live.
Yeah. There's not enough pride, I don't think, in Meadville right now, and there needs to be, because it's a great city. I mean, I can't think of a better place for my kids to grow up. I've raised 2 kids here. Mm-hmm. I love that they can just park downtown and walk around, and you can run errands, and I'm not worried about their safety, and I think Meadville's a great place. I want to keep it that way, but I want to make it even better than it was, because I remember, I'm 48 years old, and I remember coming downtown, and I love like the second Saturdays when we have everybody downtown, but I think there could be more of that. I think the shops, we can bring more businesses downtown. We can be more business friendly. We can get more employees down here, and we can get people to want to invest more into the city.
So it's about the budget, but it's about a whole lot more than that.
Mm-hmm.
That's good.
Yes, bringing businesses and downtown, and that's what brings people downtown.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. So your thoughts are, you said we're going to do this thing. Now, have you guys coordinated any of your thoughts? Have you made joint appearances? I mean,
Marcy Kantz and I?
Yes.
We've talked a lot.
Okay.
So far, we've done a lot of talking. We're on the same page on a lot of things. So we're helping each other out. We both want each other in there. So we'll both be on the Republican ticket, and we're really hoping, and we're hoping that my supporters will vote for her and her supporters will vote for me, and we can get us both in.
Well, Bill, most people know who Bill Lawrence is that have spent any time in this city, both from a business standpoint, just your name, So
Thanks.
yeah, that goes.
Hopefully that's good.
And it's funny, like when you do make these kind of decisions, you're putting a stake in the ground. Did you ever give any thought to, geez, I wonder if this impact my business?
Yes.
And it's a gut feeling.
Yes, that's why I didn't jump into it before.
Mm-hmm.
So I've always, like you mentioned earlier, I've always liked politics.
Mm-hmm.
I've always been interested. I've always paid attention. And it's something I would kind of dream about a little bit on the side, but I really thought I'm not really going to get into it because I can't right now. I have too much on my plate, But when something's important, you make the time for it and you make it happen. So am I worried about it? Most of the people that know me know where I stand on things, so I don't think I'm losing anybody. There's Democrats at my gym that I know we don't agree with everything on, but we get along fantastically. Fantastic. And some of them are Democrats that are kind of high up in the local politics.
The hierarchy.
But I'm very good friends with them. We have great conversations. They work out with me. We have a good time, and it doesn't affect anything because business is business and politics is politics, so.
Oh, you got that. I'm glad that you bring that to the table and you bring it to the attention because it is very polarizing. Mm-hmm. In the age of boycotting businesses and all these kinds of things, it's got to be on anybody's mind. I remember when I ran like, hey, I love you, but I'm not going to put your sign in my window, that kind of stuff. Yeah. And you get it.
Yeah. Yep.
So, I mean, I think that it takes a little more guts than normal when, you're here. Your business is here, very visible. You've always been an outspoken guy, but in a way that I think was very fair.
Thank you.
I mean that, and I think that'll travel far for you here tonight.
Well, I feel like I can work with people. I feel like when we look at some of these different issues, a lot of times I think there's a common ground.
100%.
On a lot of issues.
Bring that out.
And we're just not making it happen right now. It's like we're so divisive. And obviously, there's some things you're not going to agree with, but there's a common ground on almost everything. 100%. And sometimes you have to find that common ground, and I think I can do that. Yeah. I know I can do that.
I think you can too. I think that you bring a lot of common sense to it too. The common touch. And you're a people person. You're in a people business.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's about people, and you get this. The numbers are the primacy, and everything sort of flows from that, including the quality of life.
Yeah.
What you're creating and leaving. Absolutely.
Just curious, Bill. Do you find that the issues that you think are important are those the same issues that others find important when you talk to them, or are they like, yeah, I don't know, yeah, whatever?
Yes, I do. Yes.
Okay.
When I was walking around and getting signatures, that was the general consensus is the way city council is running right now is they're only taking part of the city's thoughts into consideration, and they're not working with any of the other, I would say more than half. So that always comes down to the budget, though, and how things work. So, yes, when I talk to people, that is one of the things I would tell people about the budget, but also most of the people I talk to know that the city council right now is going a little bit too far in the other direction. So we got to bring it back.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that answers your question.
Well, yeah, and Adam, let's bring up the graphic for Meadville City Council real quick. And again, for those who went to the poll, you're voting for obviously no more than 2. So this is what you're going to pretty much see in the fall.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens after tonight, Bill?
That's a good question. This is all new to me. So everything I'm doing right now is I'm doing it for the first time. And luckily I've had some great people helping me out, and the steps along the way. But after tonight, what we do is we start doing some fundraising.
Mm-hmm.
And we start gearing up for the actual campaign, because I didn't really campaign a lot because there wasn't no need to right now, because as you saw right there, it was just Marcy and I, and you can vote for 2.
Mm-hmm.
So there was no need to spend extra resources or time. Mostly just talking to people is what I'm doing now, walking around and seeing what people think about everything and the issues. And I think the games will really get fun towards the end of the summer, and definitely after Labor Day is when it'll be a good time. I'm looking forward to it for sure.
It's going to be a time like no other. Usually people say there's that little breather after the election, and it sort of heats up around fair time.
Yep.
You know, that's the kind of people start to tune in to what's going on. And
in midsummer, people are doing barbecues.
100%.
I'm doing vacation. They're not paying.
Take a vacation.
But I'm going to be working still. I can promise you that. I'll be doing it. I'll be working on the fundraising and getting ready and getting my game plan ready.
Good deal.
Fred, let's go to you here. I want to ask, because you're talking a little bit about difference between governance and politics, and it seems like everybody gets excited to get involved in a campaign. They go through the process, and then election day comes and goes, and you're sick of it. And you go, I don't think I ever want to do that again. You wash your hands, you're done. But then a couple days later, a week later, you're like, all right, bring on the next one. I'm ready to go. There's something about it, right, that just grows on you, that gets you excited?
Yeah, I think if you enjoy it, kind of from a competitive standpoint, but it's a relatively small percentage of the population. But yeah, you do, I'm definitely part of the political class. I mean, I've gotten petitions signed. I've gone to fundraisers. I've attended other events and rallies and things like that. And you do kind of roll your eyes when you see just after a presidential election, people running. And you're like, it's too early for the next time already. But then you still read the articles and you still think, boy, I hope this person gets ahead or this person does actually enter the race. So, yeah, I think it's more if you have an interest in it and you're kind of addicted to it from a competitive standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's also what turns a lot of people off is they get tired of the constant, incessant politics, and they don't like the competitive nature of it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's part of the issue, and it's a small segment that is party loyalty, and they're the ones that show up even in local primaries to vote. And that's one question I'd have for you is I've always been under the impression Meadville is more Democratic leaning. So how are you going to convince people that just vote for D that they should vote for you?
Because a lot of people know me,
Mm-hmm.
and they know my character. They know what I'm about. They know that I care about the city. And I think that in local politics especially, it doesn't always have to be so partisan. Republicans vote for Republicans, Democrats vote for Democrats. We're not talking about the border or abortion or gun control here. We're talking about running our city. And it's not necessarily the D or the R after your name for this, at least our city council. I think it's about are you going to do the right thing? And can I trust you? And I think the answer to both those for me is yes.
That's a good point. It speaks to the fact that, a lot of what anybody does that gets elected is fairly mundane. and it almost always has numbers attached to it. And those decisions are critical. It's the machination of government is, you got to have good staff.
Yeah.
And there's some hiring and firing decisions generally made. There's union issues. There's a bunch of stuff, numbers related, but they're also quality of life. Bill, I had one other question while you were talking, and it was brought up, and we are very divided. And you brought up the very critical point. Well, it's local government. It's the city. We all know each other. This isn't Los Angeles or something.
Right.
Do you think that plays? I guess that plays into your favor in a manner of speaking, because you've been a very visible person for a very long time.
Yeah.
I'm not real close to city politics, but I've known Bill for a long time. Been to the gym, we've seen each other out socially and stuff like that.
But by the way, Jack was fantastic at my gym, just so you guys know. He worked out with me for a while.
Does anybody believe
I'm telling you. The guy is in phenomenal shape. He was phenomenal shape then, and I can tell he's in phenomenal shape now and a hard worker. So,
well, thank you, Bill.
Yeah, it's true.
He wasn't paid for that, just so you know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well.
But go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, but I mean that. So I would think that kind of platform is a natural for you. You got one of the more prominent buildings in town. You've crossed a lot of paths, irrespective of party. I mean, those kinds of things seem to favor Bill Lawrence, as far as I can read.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I hope so. This is like I said before, this is my first go, and but I'm super excited about it, and I'm ready. I got the energy. I'm not going to stop doing things. I'm going to work really hard. So it took a minute for me to be, make this decision. But once I made the decision, it's all the way in.
All the way in.
All the way.
Yeah.
So I'm excited about it.
Has it been fun?
So far, I think it will. Not
Okay.
a lot has happened so far. Like for me, not a lot has happened
Right.
because I didn't have, it's Marcy and I, and we're the only two on the ballot. So it's been fun. It's been fun, just kind of digging into the issues more. Talking to Jim Roa, who's on city council right now. He's been such a help. He's been, I've been talking with him a lot. But I'm excited about the grind once we get started. I'm excited about having a debate with the people I'll be going against. I'm excited to take that challenge on. I'm ready for them, and it'll be a good time.
Well, I want to ask you, because we were talking, it's, we've sort of lost the agree to disagree mentality. Is it hard to attack somebody if you know that in their mind they think they're doing what's best for the city? Does that make that challenging?
Makes it extremely challenging because if their convictions are one way, you're not going to change that. But hopefully you can find common ground, and then if it's a debate, hopefully you can get your point across better and explain why it's better. So you have to give points. You can't insult people to the top, and you have to make sure that you're explaining to the people that are going to vote for you why your idea is good and why it's going to work. And I think I can do that.
It sounds like you really want to maintain an air of civility in all of this, too.
I do. There's no reason.
Sounds like it's very important.
There's no reason to, personal attacks and things like that. It doesn't help anybody. I know that's what people like to read and see and talk about, but it doesn't really do any good. At the end of the day, it's what are you going to – the things that people tend to talk about most in politics doesn't really affect them at all. There's no effect on them. The policy is what has the effect on people. So I care about the policy, the laws, and what's going to go into play that's actually going to affect people's day-to-day life. That's the important thing. And right now, I think the current city council is just going not in the right direction. So I think I need to bring it back the other way. And Marcy and I can do that with Jim.
So you mentioned, R's and D's. Fred, how many years have we done election coverage? And Mark, Jack, where this has come up. When it comes to these types of elections, does it matter as much to have an R or a D? And when does that really start to factor in?
I think a lot of times in local elections it doesn't really come up that much, except just to get your name on the ballot. But I think once people are in office, even just for a few weeks, they realize it's not going to be relevant. I have friends with a borough council member in another county, and he's extremely liberal, but he finds the most frustration with negotiating with the town's unions. And I know another person that sits on the city council, and they're the most politically liberal person, but they're also the most fiscally conservative, more than the Republicans that are on there.
Wow,
So I think once you get there, you realize that this is more about administration. These things are more about spending and budgets and
Yep.
and personnel issues and basic services like water and sewage and police and fire and once you start to look at that, then the partisanship, if it was there, falls away pretty quickly.
So is it surprising or not surprising when Republicans have the House and the Senate or the presidency and they can't get anything done, or the Democrats have, the majority of the seats? I mean, it just seems like there's those challenges where you think, oh, anything can go through, but they can't get it through.
It used to work like that when we had less available quick transportation. Before the 70s in particular, if you were further than an hour or two drive from D.C., you went there to stay over the congressional session, or even in the case of state legislatures. Pennsylvania is one of the states that has a full-time one, but you would go to Harrisburg and stay unless you lived in a closer distance. And once people started to be able to travel back and forth, especially with airlines, then they were encouraged by the parties to go home as often as possible to serve their constituents. So there's kind of a trade-off. You can be closer to your constituents or you can be closer to your coworkers. And once that secondary part fell away, especially in the 90s, I would say, because the Republicans won back control of Congress in '94, which is the first time in decades that they had it. Newt Gingrich was big on stay close to your voters because the Democrats lost touch. And so that just has been repeated over and over. So they don't form close bonds anymore. They don't socialize as much anymore. And so they're not able to work out things as often as possible. It still does happen. Matt Gaetz and AOC both support banning stock market trading for House members. And he's even come to her defense because they've been able to work close together behind the scenes. And I think, it still is possible if people are able to reject the party being your boss. And both those two are kind of independent people, on the far right and far left, so that they're not as afraid of as the leadership as other people. So that's how that can still work, and more people need to do that.
Nicely framed.
Yeah. Bill, obviously when you look at primaries here, voter turnout, you start looking and go, oh, okay, what do we do to get people to go out? Numbers usually aren't terrific. What are you expecting, and what are you kind of seeing?
For the primaries for tonight?
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to be really high. It's hard to say. I don't think it's going to be high, though. I think that that the voter turnout in the general in November is going to be high, though.
In the city.
In the city, because I know I'm going to get a lot of people out there for sure. But this primary, no, I'm not expecting a huge turnout. I just think that's just the way it is, especially when you look at the city, at least with city council, even whether you're voting on the Democrat side or the Republican side. We were all already on the ticket, so there was no reason for a lot of people to go out.
Right,
So a lot of people may have taken that for granted. I don't know. We'll have to see. But I mean, if you were voting Republican, it was me and Marcy. If it was Larry and Otto.
Well, that's interesting. Fred, I'll get your take. Jacqueline, get your take on this. So when you look at it, if you're in the city of Meadville and you're going, okay, do I need to go out and vote? There, as Bill was saying, they're there. You've got Christopher Seeley as commissioner. Okay, what's going to drive me? Maybe school district? I mean, what's going to make me come out? Right. Now, Sherman's doing a write-in campaign for commissioner. So, is he going to try to pull some people to come out? But if you're looking at this, you're going, I don't really need to. I'll just wait till fall.
Yeah.
You just identified the problem. So, I mean, there.
Thank you.
And it's been a plague, right? It's been a plague. So, like if you're a city guy, a city person, and like, I'm a Republican. Bill's going to get it anyways. I'm not going to bother showing up until in November. The only thing I can say is there's not, for the average person, this is just one man's opinion, not a lot of incentive. Remember the sheriff's race from 4 years ago?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Sure do.
It was.
How could you not, right?
How could you not? It was one of the most incentivized races in a very long time in Crawford County. Lot of interest, was on that race for a lot of reasons. There's no sense of that here, right? I mean, that was the final. I mean, even in the spring, it was pretty big. I guess the point of it is it's been a plague for a very long time. A lot's at stake. There's behind us, there's a lot of row offices that aren't contested, from the Democratic side of the coin. So, if we see 20% in the city, I think that's a win. And it's sad to say. I mean, in terms of turnout. There's no good answer for it. When you come up with it, tell me and we'll be rich.
I'm working on it.
We'll be rich.
Yeah.
I would say the problem is that people only get interested when it's sensational like that. Because I think for that sheriff's office, it was bizarrely personal for a lot of people.
It was.
And but that's the wrong reason.
And in a very twisted way,
Yeah.
it was also one side of the county versus another side of the
Yeah.
county
Yeah,
too.
and I
That's
think
right.
that's the wrong reason for people. I appreciate so many people got excited about it, but it's it's kind of like when people it's nice to see Trump signs out and people enthusiastic 4 years ahead of time, but at the same time, is it for the right reason? And it should be more about civic duty, and I think that's a problem is people don't appreciate the fact that unlike almost all other countries, we have control over our parties. People just show up to primaries and people complain, I don't like the two big parties. Well, we control who gets nominated. We control who gets elected to state committees. So we control all of it. But people either don't know that or they don't appreciate that they have the ability to do that. But it should be a big part of civic duty. And part of the problem is we're an incredibly individualistic country, which is a strength, but it's also a weakness because people don't see that collective and necessary good that comes out of even being involved at the party level, which a lot of people in the world don't have.
And a lot of people don't realize, I don't think, how important local government is, because a lot of times people that start off in local government, it's like the farm team to work up
It's
to
true.
national.
It's a good observation.
And this affects us more too. So it's such an important thing. It's hard to understand why there's not more enthusiasm for local government. But I think part of that is I've always believed that civics should be taught in every grade, all the way from 7th grade all the way through 12th every year. I really do. I'm not exaggerating that. At least be touched on, because I've talked to a lot of adults that aren't 100% sure how the whole primary general election thing works. I bet you guys have too. When are you running?
We met a lot of those people tonight in the park while we were setting up.
They don't know.
What are you doing? It's primary election day.
They don't know.
What's that?
They have no idea. And
no clue.
it's a shame, really. But so I do my best if someone asks, explain it. And, but I think it just needs to, I think a lot of people just don't pay attention. We need to.
Yeah.
We need to pay attention to local politics. It's super important because, like I said, those are the people that sometimes move up. Next thing you know, that person could be running for Senate or whatever. So.
100%.
Obviously, we're in the Tool City, right? And you've got a lot of these family-owned businesses that are trying to figure out succession plans. Maybe they're selling to their employees, maybe to an outside company. And those folks are leaving the community. So it's dependent upon other people now to step up and maybe fulfill a role they never thought they do. We saw that, I think, in Titusville in the late 80s, early 90s when SciTemp went out. People had to step up and say, and Fred, I'm sure you had this discussion, hey, teachers, we need to step up. We need to get involved in clubs and other service organizations. And, we need to fill these roles that have been left empty. Yeah, it is a call to service and activism.
Yeah. Because honestly, that's how I think the Republicans have lost control of a lot of things, because Democrats were smart and they took over a lot of local school boards, cities. And when you control the schools and you control the small cities, you start controlling everything. And I think Republicans have taken things like school board and city council for granted for way too long. And it's starting to show. In national politics, it's starting to show. And that's why I think you're seeing so many people like myself get into it locally.
Well, and I think there's obviously that's a discussion that, maybe this plays into what we're going to be talking about in the fall with a lot of these issues where I think, you've got a lot of people that say, listen, I don't care what you do in your own home or in your life, but, we want kids to focus on education, or we want the city to fix our road, or, just those basic things, and leave some of this other stuff out of it. But again, it's a conversation we'll probably pick up in the fall. I don't know if we're going to have time tonight. Bill, thank you so much for joining us here this evening.
Thanks for showing up.
Thanks for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome.
Greatly appreciate it. And by the way, we've had just a couple technical glitches here, but I think we're all good. But we are going to have this stuff available to rewatch on demand. But we are on Armstrong's Neighborhood channel, and we are streaming on our Stream TV platforms on Facebook and YouTube. So still plenty of ways to catch us here tonight. But Bill, we want to thank you for
Thank you. I really appreciate
stopping
it,
in.
guys.
All right, we're going to
Thank
take just a quick break, and we will be back with more. It's election coverage, primary election coverage here, live from Diamond Park in Meadville, Pennsylvania. We are here till 11 p.m. That's past Jack's bedtime.
They put me away.
But he's excited and maybe past Mark's bedtime.
Is Mark glitching out?
We'll talk to Mark. Get his thoughts. There's the beautiful courthouse behind us. Back after this. And welcome back, live from Diamond Park in beautiful Meadville, Pennsylvania. It is primary election 2023. And we've got our full panel here with us tonight. Sitting next to me is Mr. Jack Lynch, former Crawford County Commissioner. Our panelists include Mr. Mark Heim, we've got Mr. Fred Smith, and on the very end is Mr. Christian Marr from the Crawford Heritage Community Foundation. Oh, no. We're glad to have you. We're going to switch gears a little bit and be positive here tonight. Not that it hasn't been. Christian, when it comes to our communities here, we're very fortunate. You work for the Crawford Heritage Community Foundation.
Yeah, so I'm kind of apolitical in a lot of ways. But
You are, yeah. But when it comes to just the community itself, and your community is the county, you've been involved in a program called Crawford Gives, and you've seen the generosity of the residents here in Crawford County. I want you to hold on to that for just 1 second, okay? Before we let him talk about that and how kind people are here, I want to do this real quick. Let's quickly just run through some of the races we are watching here tonight. And we're going to start with Crawford County Commissioner. Those are the candidates that have appeared on the ballot. We should mention there is a write-in candidate on the Democrat side for Crawford County Commissioner, and that's C. Sherman Allen. On to the next, and this is for Crawford County Coroner. We have 3 there, and again, that is for a 4-year term. On to the next. It's Auditor, and there's 4 Republicans, 1 Democrat. And Adam, we'll just kind of quickly scroll through all these. Crawford Central School District, you're voting for 5 there. That's a 4-year term. Again, we could probably devote the whole show to just talking school district content here. Next, we've got Pencrest, obviously a whole slew of candidates there. You're voting for 5 for 4 years. Titusville Area School District, if you notice, a lot have cross-filed, and that's been the case for a number of years there, Fred. And City of Meadville, we just talked to Bill, but he and Marcy on the Republican side. You've got Autumn and Larry, the incumbents on the Democrat side who sit on council now. And those 4 will be on the ballot in the fall. Titusville, you got a whole bunch of writing candidates. And then you've got Gavin Griffin. Interesting story with Gavin. He's 18, 19 years old, just finished his first year at Mercyhurst University, and was a junior council member, and decided to step up and run. And if you notice, that young man got the signatures and is on the ballot. Where a lot of folks at the last minute in Titusville said, you know what, I think we want to run. And nothing against Gavin. They just, some things have come up, and they've mounted a write-in campaign. And then the other race we're looking at is the Venango County Commissioners, again, 4-year term. Chipper Bramovic, incumbent. Sam Breen, incumbent. What's interesting, Matthew Beath, the well-known name in Venango County. You've got Bill Moon. Currently, he's the mayor in the city of Oil City running. So there you go. That's what we're looking at. And again, we are live here tonight. We got the courthouse behind us. It is a beautiful evening. It's been a beautiful day to vote. Really no excuse there. You know, rain, snow, none of that. It was great to get out. And let's go back to Christian and just the generosity of folks here in Northwest Pennsylvania.
Well, sure. I mean, this is a great place to live, and I think one of the important things about elections is that, you know, we kind of live our values, and we vote our values in Crawford Gives and some other things by putting our money where our mouth is. And so this is a good opportunity for us to do that, and, you know.
Do you shake your head from time to time when politics becomes politics?
I think I do, but, I mean, around here, it's such a small community that I have to see people at the post office, and I might not agree with them politically, but we have to be friends. We have to think about the health of the entire region and what's going to be good for everybody. And if we're not all pulling together in some direction, you know, we're not going to get anywhere. And so, because I mean, I've said this to you before, you know, nobody's coming from Washington, D.C. to save us all.
Nobody's waking up looking for a reason to save
right.
Crawford County.
No one in Harrisburg is looking
That's right.
for more reasons to send cash to Crawford County. So, you know, it's kind of incumbent upon us to do a lot of that work, which requires us to be friends in some respects and help each other. I mean, you remember this in your role as commissioner. You know, we might not have agreed on everything, but our overarching goal was that this community was going to be a better place, that we were going to make it a good place for everybody to live, work, raise a family, and we might have differed on the ways that we get to those goals, but I think we all have the same kind of vision in mind.
Go ahead. Can I go now?
Yeah.
So I
you're sitting. Yeah, you're co-host.
I just have a quick question. You said something pretty key, like apolitical. Bill was just on, and he said something that's very true, right? He said that when you get down to it, there's 4 that are competing.
Yeah.
Not a lot of turnout, but
You
those
had 3 fingers though.
Yeah.
4.
Right, exactly. It begins. Anyways, here we go. So when you pull the lever, you're looking at, locally that person that brings the values that you think will fulfill that job. Because we need good people doing these things. It's not so much pulling the stick for all the Dems or all the Republicans.
Yeah, and then you want the people who are going to listen to the constituents and really take the feedback that we're giving them, because we don't have the time to look at all the issues in great depth. Like we know we've got a finite amount of money that we want to spend on things, and the most important things like Bill said, it's good roads, it's quality of life, it's good parks, those kind of things, and it's figuring out okay, well, how do we do that?
Right.
There are sources of funding. If we're mobilized and we're working together, there's ways to get those monies here. Harrisburg and Washington aren't coming to save us, but there is ways to leverage some of that back here.
That's interesting. Jack, I know you've heard this. Mark and I think have talked about it too. Those candidates said, I'm not going to take the state dollars, or I'm not going to take the federal dollar. Well, guess what? If they're not coming here, somebody else is getting them.
Right.
1,000%.
Fred, I want to ask you, do you ever hear these conversations and think, it's not like one party's going to disappear. Like, we need to work together because you're not going to wipe out one side and just have, everybody on the same page. Like, you're going to have at least 2 parties.
Yeah, it's it's funny whenever one of them faces a big loss, there's a lot of political news, like, is this the end of the Democratic Party, or is this the end of the Republican Party? It's like, no, they've been around for a long time, so it's probably not going to happen. So I think it's unrealistic. And when you start, we mentioned earlier the competitiveness, and I kind of makes me cringe when people talk about one or the other being evil or the enemy or anything like that. I don't think that really helps the situation. I think that does convince a lot of average people that maybe that's the case when it's not true.
Right.
So it kind of behooves us to try to work together no matter what our party affiliation in order to come up with the best solutions possible. And that's something that I try to teach in my classes is, we don't pass laws simply to rule over people or stop something from happening. We should pass laws to provide a service that maybe the businesses in the private sector can't. Where something can't happen. It was brought up earlier, EMTs, and one of the other issues is volunteer fire companies throughout rural areas, especially in Pennsylvania. For a long time, there has been market failure there. No private business is going to provide volunteer fire departments. Many EMTs are some kind of quasi for-profit organization. But both of those situations, it's not just drawing enough employees or revenue for those in order to function. And so Republicans and Democrats are going to have to work together in order to try to come up with a solution to that, because, as was pointed out, as Pennsylvania's population ages, especially in rural areas, it's going to be difficult more and more for one to bring in revenue, but also to get people to work in those fields.
And you're right. It's not a zero-sum game. Where you can't demonize somebody when you see them at the post office every other day, or you can, but it makes it more difficult when you know that that ultimately you've got to work together on finding solutions.
Christian, I want to ask you, obviously you're somebody who is assessing the needs of the communities you serve. Has that become more difficult?
I think you've got to decide which measures are important to people. And so that's really where kind of we are right now, is trying to figure out, okay, well, how do we present a picture of what is a healthy community? And is that is that just the unemployment rate, or is it how much people are taking home? Is it number of kids in schools who are on free and reduced lunch? Are those the measures that we really go for? Is it incarcerations or things like that? And so, we could really get lost in the weeds of a lot of measures of healthy communities, and we have certainly in the past. But then it's kind of incumbent upon the organizations that we work with. In Crawford Gives, at least, we have like 150 different organizations who are participating and all do a little bit of something to make this community better. And so a lot of it's incumbent upon them to say, okay, these are the things that we work on. These are the things that we think are important to address. And whether it's, parks and recreation and those kind of things, or is it, really putting a lot more focus on jobs and job readiness, civics and things like that, just making sure that, young people know what the voting process is about, what kinds of things make an impact in our communities, those kind of things. So,
you've been there a few years, right? I mean,
20, yeah.
It's been that long?
Yeah, just a few.
Wow, you must have started when you were 14.
Well, I thank you. I appreciate that.
So, during your tenure, are you finding it's harder to fundraise?
No, we have a super generous community, and I mean, people
good
want to support things that touch their heart and that they feel have an impact. I mean, it's mostly the impact piece. I mean, they want to see their money at work, and the organizations taking that and using it in a way that's having good outcomes. And so luckily we've got a really strong nonprofit sector here, and we've got people who have been blessed with pretty good jobs that they have a little bit of discretionary income that they can do those things. And as I was talking to Jay off camera, we've got a lot of people who've grew up here and still really consider Crawford County home and still give to the organizations here. So I mean, in Jay's case, he's on the board for the rec complex, Meadville Area Recreation Complex, and there's kids who've gone on to other things, but grew up swimming or playing hockey, and they now that they're adults, they're like, I want other people to have those kind of experiences. So, I'm going to make a charitable gift.
So you find these things actually cross political lines.
Oh, for sure.
How do we communicate that to young people, though?
I think that's always going to be a challenge, communicating those things to young people. Because I left my hometown. I go back every once in a while. I give to some things that were really important to me growing up there. And so, I think that's kind of natural, too, that some people are going to move away, some are going to come back, especially now that we've got all these remote jobs. A lot of people are coming back. So it's, it's kind of a learning curve. You go away and then you come to appreciate where you grew up and things. So it's a tough one. I don't think you can just be like, hey, appreciate where you are. You have to go out and experience it.
Sorry, guys. Christian, I want to talk about the lines here real quick because the lines for a long time used to divide the county, and it wasn't just Meadville versus Titusville.
Oh,
We've seen it with Oil City versus Franklin. These walls have been coming down. Crawford Heritage Community Foundation's one of the first organizations to say, hey, there's no boundaries here. Let's work together.
Well, and I mean, I think we've seen, we've kind of been pressured with, hospital consolidation and things like that. So, we're blessed to have an independent hospital that cover both ends of the county. And I think a lot of the nonprofit organizations that we work with have realized that we're a lot stronger together regionally. And so we're trying to do more things. What we're really trying to do is, build capacity so that each of those organizations has the ability to do the thing, provide the impact that they want to. And maybe that is cooperating a little, and that definitely is cooperating a little more. And so how do we encourage that? How do we do it? Because, there's too few of us here to get every single thing done if we're working in a little silo. Right. But if we're coming together and deciding as a group, like, okay, these are the things that are important to us, we can really make an impact on stuff. If we think housing is important, we can find sources of revenue to create new housing. it's just a matter of us talking and having that discourse, and that's where the political process can come in too. So I mean, in the city of Meadville, it's a question of rental housing and rental inspections, and we've seen a lot of talk on both sides. We'll see where that ends up.
Is there ever a point in time, I've always been curious about this, I think I know the answer, but like a theme emerges over time and then, well, we've kind of moved on from that, or we fixed that, and then something else, is it kind of shift shape like that over time, or is it a...
Oh, sure. I mean, especially in the past few years, we've seen opioids take center stage as a detriment to communities and personal health, and it's cut across all socioeconomic lines.
Right.
And we hope that now that there's much more awareness, that we're seeing less impact from that, but it's probably going to be years that the fallout of things like that continue to make an impact on society, and so we're always going to have problems. It's just a matter of what's most important at the time. How do we address them? What kinds of political will there is to get funds and things to make a move.
You have a board. You have a board of directors.
I do. It's really busy behind us.
It is. I'm wondering.
Yeah.
There's somebody we know. Hey, Mayor.
Yeah, he's the guy you want to talk to.
Exactly. You've got a board. How do folks get in touch with you? I mean, a lot of people know who you are, obviously. Some don't, but I mean,
they should, but
it's true.
No, the Community Foundation's got a website and all the usual stuff, so they can always reach out to me. And
how generous is the county? What did Crawford Gibbs bring in last year?
So the Crawford Gibbs brought in about $700,000. We're hoping $1 million this year. So
yeah, incredible.
That's amazing.
Well, for a small rural county, it really is impressive. Just the amount of money that people can give, and it really is. I mean, it's voting with your dollars on things. So
that's impressive.
Real quick, Christian, we'll wrap with this. Just the creativity from folks in this county. You see with organizations when they are writing you grants. I think people would be surprised what sort of grants get awarded. Cemetery funds. I mean, that's important for a number of reasons. But just what you receive in terms of the needs. There's some pretty creative things going on.
There are. I mean, if you look at just our trail system in the county, we've had an expansion at the Clear Lake Trail out in Spartansburg. The French Creek recreational trails that runs the Ernst Trail here in Meadville has had an expansion of that trail. So, I mean, I think we're always adding on, those kind of amenities, and a lot of those organizations do it in a really quiet way. And, I've been working the last quarter on helping recreational trails get some additional monies for their project. And so it's just interesting to see like the people who come out and are like, hey, this is a thing that's important to me. I want to support this. How do we make this happen?
Yeah.
All right. Well said. No, it's great. And again, you kind of have to wade through the political muck out there, and
well, I mean,
we make it sound worse than what it is. It's not too bad.
Well, around here, like I said, I got to see these people at the post office every day, or out to coffee or something, and so and our overarching goal is that we want this to be a livable community.
Yeah.
So it's just we might have different opinions about how to get there.
Yeah. Fred, kind of along those lines, I'm sure you see it from both sides. I'm sure you hear school board members say something, you go, ugh, and then you hear parents, and you go, I wouldn't say that, but yeah, they kind of have a point there. Again, it's sort of, wading through everything.
Yeah, I mean, people have kind of preconceived ideas, but I think once they get a good explanation, I think one good thing our district does is at the work sessions, the committee meetings where they go over all of the resolutions that are going to be passed next time, they have all the administrative staff there to answer questions, just to get an explanation of what's going on. And if there are concerns that come from the community, usually the public doesn't attend the meetings, but if there is someone with a question, it can be answered pretty readily. And usually people are pretty accepting of that. I mentioned earlier about the athletic complexes when they were renovated. One of the issues was the soccer field at the Ed Meyer complex. I mean, if you're familiar with it at all, it's basically in a kind of a wetland area, and it's enormously saturated all the time. And so that was one of the reasons.
Monty Python?
And putting in the AstroTurf was so it would be a multi-purpose field. And there are people that came up concerned, why can't we just, plow the field and have it settle in and then it will be fine? But, it was explained, we've done studies before, and people seem to be satisfied with the answers that they were given.
All right, guys. Christian, thanks for
Hey, nice
stopping
seeing you.
by.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Absolutely.
We have Marcy Kantz. We have Gavin Griffin. It's all coming up next hour as we wrap up hour number 2. Polls have been closed for just about an hour now. Mark's been looking at his phone for results, and we're going to continue to do that next hour. All right, our coverage will continue. We are live from Diamond Park in beautiful Meadville, Pennsylvania. It's been a great night. Our coverage will continue halfway through. Look at that. What a
That's
beautiful
fantastic.
building. We'll be back right after this. And we are live from beautiful Diamond Park in Meadville, Pennsylvania. That shot coming to us from the courthouse.
Yes.
Looking across the street. It's a beautiful night, beautiful day. No excuse not to get out and vote. Polls have been closed for over an hour now. It's a beautiful courthouse, and we welcome you to our coverage. We are here until 11 o'clock tonight on Stream Television and on Armstrong's Neighborhood Channel. I got Jack Lynch here with me tonight, along with Mr. Fred Smith. We have Marcy Kantz with us, candidate for Meadville City Council, and we've got Gavin Griffin, candidate for Titusville City Council. Welcome to the program tonight. And before we talk to the candidates, let's quickly just recap the races we're following, and we'll start with the Crawford County Commissioner race. Again, we'll spend the next couple hours into this, Jack, but that's what
Absolutely.
we're looking at. If you went in to vote today, those are the names you saw on the ballot. Here's the coroner race. The Republicans. Auditor. 4 Republicans, 1 Democrat. Now we get into some names here. Crawford Central School District.
And this is an unprecedented, we spoke earlier, we'll speak through it through the evening. Number of candidates, you're voting for 5. If you take a look at that, you're looking at, I think it may be a record. Let's check into that, because that is something that you just don't see.
And there's Pencrest, so obviously a lot of things going on with Pencrest, and again, later we'll maybe dive into some of that stuff.
Yep.
And then we've got Titusville Area School District, a lot of candidates who cross-filed there, so they appeared on both the Republican and Democrat side of the slate. On to the next, and City of Meadville. Oh, there's Marcy's name right there. We talked to Bill earlier. We're going to talk to Marcy in just a moment. There's Autumn Vogel and Larry McKnight. They are both currently sitting on Meadville City Council. We did reach out to them and have not heard anything back from them yet, and we'll see if they can join us a little bit later. For the City of Titusville, there's Gavin's name, and an awful lot to be proud of there, Gavin, as you're the lone wolf on that slate, but there are some writing candidates in Titusville. And then the other one we're kind of keeping an eye out, and Mark's working on that right now, Venango County Commissioners, again, 4-year term. You've got Sam Breen, the incumbent, Chip Abramovic on the Democrat side, who also is very heavily involved on the state level with CPAC. Jack kind of overseeing that for the state. So Matthew Beath, a well-known name in Venango County, as well as Bill Moon, who's currently the mayor of Oil City. All right, so we are here tonight in Diamond Park, taking the show on the road this primary, and excited to be here. Let's start with our guests here. We have Marcy Kantz, candidate for Meadville City Council, and Gavin Griffin. Marcy, good to see you.
Thank you.
Not the first time entering the political arena. What's been different this time around?
Well, I'm going to do it right this time and be on the ballot.
We'll talk about that, because you kind of entered the race late last time as a write-in.
I did. I was not paying strict attention to local politics at the time, but after I saw that the local Democrat candidates were thrown out of office by a group supported by PA United, that got my attention. The outside influence of the election I don't think is favorable to our local politics. And so I jumped into the race and did very well, but in the end it wasn't enough to pull out a win.
So this time you're on the ballot.
Mm-hmm.
And that was response to what you said was an outside group that kind of came in and had some workers inside the city.
Correct.
And was very effective.
Yes.
And so that was an eye-opener for you. It piqued your interest.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. And now PA United does have an office here in Meadville. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure how that works with the Democrat committee office over there. But I know that a lot of Democrats are not happy as well, as they ousted our local Democrat candidates here.
And that's through a grassroots effort that they were able to be so effective. You got to know the lay of the land, right?
It is. They are well organized and hardworking, and it's going to take a lot for us to overcome them. However, I feel that the city is crying out for change, and that the PA United social experiment has not worked for the city of Meadville. I do not feel that we are better off today than we were 4 years ago.
Well, specifically, what are things that you see maybe, or that you're hearing that you want to address should you get elected in the fall?
Well, first of all, we do have a looming budget deficit of close to $1 million. And I feel that Bill and I, as the Republican challengers with proven business experience, will be better fit for working on that budget. We have proven experience here in Meadville. We are local candidates, and that is going to be one of Bill and I's main focus, is rectifying that looming budget crisis.
It's funny because we were talking, it's been a year where everybody's been hit hard in the pocketbook, and everybody's been struggling to live within their means. Where do you cut? Do you have to raise? You know, if there was ever a time to raise taxes, this was probably it. And most everybody pretty much
Held the line.
Yeah. Did that surprise you at all?
Well, we had increases earlier. The taxes are incredible here in the city of Meadville, and they keep our property values low, and they also deter people from moving into the city of Meadville, as well as businesses. So they are already so high that there is not much more we can ask of our property taxpayers and our business owners here in Meadville. We are pushing business away, pushing residents out, and we need to find a way to turn that around. And I understand that's going to be a huge task, and it's not going to be done in a year or two. But we need to find formidable ways to bring in business and tourists and residents in the city of Meadville to expand our tax base, because we're not going to be able to handle this on the tax base that we have now.
So we talked with Bill earlier, and we asked the same kinds of questions. Meadville, like most cities, right? You've got a lot of parcels. The building behind us isn't on the tax rolls. The building across the street, the church on the corner, and so forth. You've got Allegheny College. You take a look at the city. There's a lot less structures than there were 50 years ago. They're just what there just is. They're now parking lots. Question for you: if you can correct things through the budget, what can you do to bring business back? I mean, the tax rate is what the tax rate is. Is there any other measures you would look to take, or what would you advocate for as a council person?
Well, you can make exceptions and tax breaks for city business, or for businesses to come in. Also, regulation and zoning also deters businesses from coming in. And the other thing is that we also need to bring tourism back to Meadville and focus on the French Creek Corridor project, because that will bring business in.
Is that still in play, that project?
That is still in play.
Okay.
So that would bring in a lot of business, that would bring in people, and that would increase the business that is already here. So Chestnut Street could greatly increase in business with that sort of a tourism attraction down there. To me, that is a huge deal for Meadville, because I'm not sure how else we're going to bring in big business with how things are right now in Meadville. But the tourism is a viable option in my mind.
Let's go to the other side of the county for a moment and introduce Gavin Griffin, who joins us here. Gavin, welcome. I'm not sure, are you the youngest candidate to run for city council in Titusville?
If not the youngest, one of the youngest.
Okay, how old are you?
I'm 18.
You are 18. You just
Yes.
finished your first year at Mercyhurst University.
Yes.
Now, you started because of a cool program, the junior council, What's
Junior council program.
Junior
Yes,
council
I
program.
did 6
okay.
months with the city as a junior councilman, and there was a high school senior and a high school junior in that program, and we got the experience of sitting with council at every meeting and getting to deliberate on all the big issues that were facing the city.
What was that experience like for you?
Well, it was very inspirational. I'm here tonight because of it, and
I guess it meant something.
It gave me a lot of
Yeah,
insight.
Fascinated.
So what's fascinating is, we talked to Marcy about the last time and doing a writing campaign. You went out, you got signatures, you appeared on the ballot. Now, on the Republican side of things, there's a bunch of write-ins, and I don't know if they've crossed, or if I guess they could if they're doing a write-in. But how difficult was it to go out and do that?
Well, it was tough work. It was, February, and the weather wasn't the best. And, of course, hunting down Democrats in Titusville can be like finding a needle in a haystack. But
yeah,
it was tough work, but I think in the end worth it.
Okay. And, again, this was a program that you got involved with in school. Fred, kind of talk a little bit about that, just sort of the pride seeing that's, a program that introduces somebody, a student, to well, in this case, politics, translates into somebody actually running for a political position.
That's great, and it's. I think also the year that Gab was involved, they held a number of input meetings that a number of students attended. So it wasn't just the two people that were junior city council
That's
members.
true.
It was also a certain portion of the student body that showed up pretty regularly to attend those meetings and give feedback about things going on in the city and concerns that they had. And we have another 2 involved this year as well. So I'm glad to see people stepping up to the plate, and I wish more municipal organizations did that, because I think that would help out a lot. And we talked a little bit earlier, not just elected positions, but also volunteer organizations. I know there are volunteer fire departments that try to get out or try to entice young people to become involved, but I think that needs to happen in a lot more organizations more often.
Yeah, and I will be the first to tell you, I told Gavin I didn't think he should run. I said I think you should focus on school and enjoy that. You've got the rest of your life. But then the more I thought about it, I'm a big believer in real life experience, and here you said I'm going to do it. And I'm like, okay, I'll change my mind.
Look at Chris Seeley running for county commissioner. He was, I think, the youngest mayor in the state at one point in Linesville. He was 18 years old.
Yeah, that's right.
Right?
That's
So
right.
you
Yeah.
get that. Let me ask you a question. Marcy spoke to some of the issues that she sees. It's in, that she's running. And what, aside from the interests that were sparked, what do you see as the core interests, or the core problems, or the core issues in Titusville, and how do you can help that?
Well, I think our core central issue this year is public safety. We continue to look at our fire and police departments and make sure that they're properly staffed and equipped.
They're paid departments, right?
Yes, yes. And so focusing on their needs and making sure that we talk with the gentleman on the police force and the fire department to know what they need to do their jobs effectively. But another major point of me running is that we have 4 of our 5 council seats up, and I think that it's important that we have 4 good people to come on and create a new council next year. So,
And I think that's why you see so many people running, because there are a lot of empty seats available.
Right.
Marcy, when we talk about various things, it's sometimes funny when we're mentioning these things, thinking that the problems are just within Meadville or just within Titusville, but blight, for an example, or EMS services. But it really affects all these communities.
Yeah, absolutely. We do have a lot of blight here for sure, and that will be a focus of mine if I am elected in November.
Emergency, services. Jack mentioned asking Gavin about Titusville being a paid fire department. Obviously, these are things that come up in budget talks as well. Would a city be better off going, volunteer? Are those discussions that you have with folks?
I've never discussed going volunteer with fire department, and of course, I would be a proponent for fully staffed police department, and for our city to be tough on crime. As for the ambulance, that is something that I would have to take a hard look at the budget. I realize that they made major changes this year. I will take a hard look at those numbers and decide after 1 year is over and see where everything comes out.
There's really a lot to it, isn't there? I mean, there's a lot to go through.
Well, there is, and I've spoken to a lot of people, and
is.
you can't just take a glance at it, and you have to really study it and compare numbers and look in depth at the numbers and make sure you're comparing apples to apples.
Is it hard, and both of you can answer this as candidates, when somebody asks you a question and they're expecting a big answer, but the reality is you can't, because you need to learn and see exactly what is at play before you can answer that. Is that difficult?
For me, yes, but I think you have to look at the candidate and look at their experience and trust that they're going to do the right thing by looking at what they've done in their lives. Bill and I have a proven track record in business, and we are local candidates who are committed to Meadville, or we are major stakeholders here in Meadville. Our families are here. My parents have been here. My grandparents have been here, and we don't want to see Meadville. We want to see Meadville thrive is what we want, is what I want as a business owner. I own a couple of businesses in Meadville and some rental properties here. So I'm a big stakeholder here. And I know that a lot of other stakeholders are feeling that they are not being well represented by the current council.
Gavin, how about for you? Is that a difficult thing when somebody's expecting a big answer? And again, the reality is, even as a junior council member, you weren't privy to. Well, you couldn't vote.
Yes, correct.
Were you allowed into like executive sessions?
No, I was not.
Okay, so there are some things you probably would have to say. Hey, let me find out, right?
Yes, and it can be. I understand that it can be disappointing for people to hear. You know, I don't have all the facts yet. But again, I would agree that the biggest issue, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, is sensible and responsible government. And you take your time to deliberate and figure out what you're going to do before you make any snap judgments. And I think that's part of what people have a tough time realizing on the campaign trail. But
you both have gone out, spoken with groups, with individuals. What's that like? Do you enjoy that part of the campaign work, the time that goes into it?
Well, my favorite part is going door to door and talking to people, in their homes, on their doorsteps, and figuring out what matters to them, Democrat or Republican. And, I think it's important that we go out and actually talk to people instead of focusing on what's on Facebook or what you're, reading, on the internet.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. I do not focus on what's on Facebook or social media. Door-to-door is not my favorite thing. I would rather be at a public event and have people come to me to talk to me about things. But I do love talking to residents about their concerns, and I do enjoy very much just talking one-on-one with people.
And when Bill was here, he indicated, he basically said he hasn't done a whole lot. Quite admission, but I mean, again, he's going to kick in hard from this moving forward and all summer fundraising and so forth. What kind of feedback, Marcy, are you guys both getting from your campaign, both as a write-in and in your case, you were write-in, now you're on the ballot. What kind of feedback are you getting from folks here on your campaign trails?
I'm getting a lot of positive feedback. I believe that my campaign manager and I, which my campaign manager is Bill Chisholm, who is obviously very well known here in Meadville. And I think that we are going to build a team in Meadville of both Republicans and Democrats that are looking for a change and who want to be represented. I feel like I've heard a lot that council is too focused on one focus group not the taxpayers or the stakeholders here in Meadville.
Interesting. Fred, just in terms of when you look back at how people ran campaigns and the door-to-door versus social media or having events, has a lot changed over the years in what you've studied? Is it the way of getting the message different, or is it the same?
Yeah, I think when social media was in its infancy, and maybe it still is, but when it first came out, anybody who tried to use it for political purposes, it was kind of a joke. But I think it became more serious on a national level. Bernie Sanders and the OC both used it quite a bit. And but I think on a local level, people still look for more of that intimate contact that they have with each other in a community. And I think, grassroots efforts, whether it's going door to door or going to church events or, Eagle Scout ceremonies or whatever, I think that still helps that a lot. A congressman that used to represent part of this area but doesn't anymore, or he represented Titusville, Glenn Thompson. He does a lot of constituent work. He goes to pretty much any event that he can. He drives himself. He drives the same car that he's had for years and puts on a lot of miles. And I think on a local level, especially in rural areas, people appreciate that more. And I just want to ask a question, because we brought up blight.
Yeah.
How much of a problem in Meadville is not just absentee landlords, but absentee landowners? Is that an issue here?
It absolutely is. We've had several buildings here that have been on the blight list, and nothing's been done. And we, as residents, keep hearing that something's going to be done, but nothing has been done. There are multitudes of buildings that way.
And that's a problem in Titusville, too.
Yes, there's a blight review committee that I was fortunate enough to join on a couple of meetings, and it's a big issue. It's something that we're not fully equipped to deal with right now, and I think moving forward, it's
There's
something
a lot
we
of
need
cost
continue
to
with.
it.
Yeah,
Somebody's paying for it.
Right.
yes.
And it's hard to. Is that, Marcy? I'll ask you as a Republican who, government interference and all that. You want to tell somebody what to do with their property. On the other hand, when a building's falling in, what do you do?
Well, we have to, as landowners, property owners, we have to be responsible landowners. So I don't, as in coming in and taking care of blight, that has to be done. That's a detriment to our city.
Real quick, we'll let you both answer this. A lot of talk, Republican, Democrat. Once the campaigning is over, and let's say you both are serving on council, does that sort of go away, and then the topics of the city come into play?
I believe it does, and I believe that on the local level, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, I don't think that much matters when you're talking about your city issues, because that's all we're focused on is our city issues. And the concerns of a Democrat are the same as a Republican. So we will come together, and I am drawing Democrats to our committee and looking for support that way. They have the same concerns. Locally, Democrat and Republicans can join together and it not be an issue. But I will say the current council is backed by an organization that is it's a national organization, and it's much further left than our local Democrats here. And I do believe that our city Democrats are looking for a change.
How about you, Gavin?
I think that I would have to agree. Once you get in there, the issue of Democrat and Republican goes away, and then you start fighting over the individual issues, and you may have different means of fixing things, but I think our concerns and our hopes and our goals are going to be the same.
And that's what it should be, right?
Well, yes.
Yeah, that's when you're getting people saying, when's Halloween? When's trick or treat? When's my road going to get paved? When's this going to happen? Yeah. That's the kind of stuff that. Are you both amazed at what draws people's attention to politics or to city council? In this case, you're both going for city council, but what gets people fired up?
Sometimes I feel I am surprised at some of the things that they get fired up about, or that they think that I can get into office and change, because some of those things I wouldn't be able to do. But for the most part, I think that our residents are reasonable and they want a person that is well grounded, with business experience, and who cares about the city to be in office making decisions for them.
I often am surprised by the kind of things that bring people out to vote or out to a council meeting. But in the end, that's what leads us to solving issues that we have in the city that maybe we as council people didn't know about. And so I think whether it's trash or a noisy neighbor or, when we're going to have Oil Festival, people are going to come out and they're going to find a way to get involved and give input to the city.
You both will be appearing on the ballot this fall.
Right.
I no disrespect whatsoever with this question. Kind of talked to Bill a little bit about this, but I don't want to say you kind of cruise through this part of it, right? But you had a chance to kind of say, okay, here's the start. What happens now, between now and August, with your campaigns?
Well, we are going to be meeting with local business leaders. And right after the primary, which will be next week, I will be meeting with my campaign chairman, William Chisholm, as well as Sam Feely, who is ahead of my social media, and some local business leaders that I have already reached out to, who said that they're willing to come on board as advisors of our campaign. So we will meet, we will be advised, we will create a budget, and we will begin to market myself as a candidate for city council.
Excellent. Gavin?
For me, it'll probably be a lot more door-to-door, meeting with people face-to-face, and, of course, meeting with business owners and attending events throughout the summer and into the fall. And I look forward to a busy fall election cycle.
How's your first year at college?
How's that going to work? How's that going to work?
Well, I have to say that I've never had trouble balancing a lot on my plate. I've worked for Luke, and I've worked for 2 other local businesses when I was in high school and middle school. I also, of course, had school and junior council, and so I've got the determination to make it work.
So what's a former teacher say about you doing this? Should he just focus on having fun in school, or is this a good thing?
Well, I myself hate fun, so I don't really have a problem with ignoring it. But I would have to, Gavin worked a lot, and he had my class, which is torture, so he was able to get through all that. And so I think he can probably make a better balance of it than a lot of adults. So, well, you're already adult, but you know what I mean, somebody that's much older. So I think it's fantastic, and I think he can make it work probably better than most people.
All right. Marcy Cant's running for Meadville City Council. We've got Gavin Griffin running for Titusville City Council. Thank you so much for joining us here tonight, and best of luck with
Appreciate
everything.
You guys coming by.
Hopefully we can
Thanks for having me.
touch base with you election time, right?
Yep.
November.
I don't know if we'll be in the park.
Yeah, I doubt that. I hope not.
Maybe it
Boy,
will be.
it's
That's
nice.
a perfect hook.
Oh, my gosh. You know what a perfect hook is? Let me just show you this real quick before we take a quick break. I want to thank Mike and company at Pizza Villa. They are just right over there, and it has been fantastic pizza. I think these guys have been around the longest in Crawford County.
Pretty much.
So visit Mike and crew. They're closed tonight, but you got the rest of the week to support them and just enjoy some great pizza and all the other things they have from Pizza Villa. Thanks, Mike and crew down at Pizza Village, home of the Villa Submarine Sandwich that you can check out. They got Mexican food sandwiches and a whole lot more. So Pizza Villa, thank you so much. All right, a quick timeout. We've got write-in candidate C. Sherman Allen going to be joining us coming up in just a little bit. We are live from Diamond Park in beautiful Meadville, Pennsylvania. What a great night.
Fantastic.
Mark's cold, but we'll get a jacket for him.
Mark's always cool.
Our coverage will continue right after this. I think the party's just getting started. Live from Diamond Park in beautiful Meadville, Pennsylvania. Hi, folks. Glad you could be with us here. It's primary election. Yeah.
We see a familiar face at the end of the Diaz here.
Oh, yes. We'll
See
get
Sherman
to
Allen.
Sherman here in just a moment. Luke Rio, Jack Lynch with you. Well, we're still, no, we're not even at the top of the hour yet. It's 9:30. We're here till 11. Plenty of time to come down and join us here this evening if you'd like to be part. Listen, we've kind of reached out to some other candidates. We haven't heard back yet, but if you're watching or somebody you know is watching, let them know. We'd love to have them appear with us. Real quick, let's just kind of go through some of the races we're watching. Adam, we'll do this real fast. Commissioner. Boom. Coroner. There it is. Auditor. Crawford Central School District, like most of the county. Pencrest, there's the rest of them.
There you go.
Titusville, we've got a lot of cross-filers there, so that's what you're seeing. City of Meadville, Marcy Bill, Autumn and Larry. City of Titusville, Gavin Griffin, and some write-in candidates. And we still have to talk about that maybe next hour. Venango County Commissioners. Sam Bream, Chip Abramovic are your incumbents. Matthew Beath running with Chip there. And you got Bill Moon, another name you might recognize. He's currently the mayor of Oil City. All right, welcome back here tonight. Luke Rio, Jack Lynch. We have with us over here Mark Heim, who is just finished eating.
Just finished.
Excellent. Good. Mark's also been watching for election results, which we'll continue to look at. We've got Mr. Fred Smith joining us. He is an educator with Titusville Area School District. And we have, there's a guy that people, yes, sir.
Let me introduce this gentleman.
Yeah, you go ahead.
Got me?
Yeah.
So I had the pleasure to work with Sherman for a term on the Board of Commissioners. One of the more colorful people, I mean it in a very positive sense, Sherman.
Orange color.
Orange color.
Yep.
And I would say that if you don't know Sherman, get to know him. He's an interesting individual. He's got a lot to say. He brought a lot to the Board of Commissioners. And he's certainly he's outspoken. So we welcome C. Sherman Allen, who is a write-in candidate on the Democratic side for County Commissioner. Sherman?
Thank you.
Welcome.
Welcome.
Yeah. Glad to be here.
Well, when did you decide you want to throw your hat in the ring?
Yeah.
Well, when I heard that the county commissioners now were talking about selling the Crawford County Care Center, and that kind of really touched my heart about knowing what the heck was going on, because back when I was county commissioner, there was no problems with the care center as far as having the monies and to operate, and as far as I know, they even had money in the bank, at that time. So it was kind of hard for me to imagine that they get I believe they had another company come in to administer, or and then they had a lady there to run it, I guess, or whatever you want to call it, there. But I just couldn't figure that out, what was going on. You know what I mean? So, and I've seen too many of our place. In my opinion, I've seen too many things in the county being sold to out of state corporations that don't really have any feelings for the people here in Crawford County. And I think if you have Crawford County people running Crawford County organizations, it's a lot better, and they have a lot more, what's the word I want to use, a lot more meaning and, dedication to it. It's just like, Connect 55 up here, they raise their rates. I've talked to one lady from $1,300 and some odd dollars to over $1,800, just like that, and she didn't change her thing. And then there was rumors that one person that came down and here at the city, and they started that situation about that started the situation about about the landlords, retaliation and everything. Well, supposedly the one people that came down there, they were kind of more or less told that they weren't going to get theirs renewed. Well, that's against the law, so I don't know how much truth there is to that. But anyways, I see out of county, out of state, Rolling Brewing Fields. That was sold from a family organization. My aunt was in there for a number of years, and they were sold to I think they're out of New York too, as far as that's concerned. Of Corporation, and it was kind of ironic there. I was reading the Meadville paper that they got $300,000, I believe. I hope I'm saying that to correct them out, for some kind of a thing to help the residents of Rolling Fields. Then in another article I read where they finally paid their real estate taxes, which was, I don't know how much that was, but they were behind in paying the real estate taxes. So it kind of it just doesn't make sense to me, folks.
Well, Sherman, I mean, you were in the room, you were in the building across the street. You know, there's a multitude of issues facing the county. What do you say? A couple things I just want to ask you. I mean, the differentiating between the care center currently and then the quality living center, where those were essentially indigenous, those folks had nothing. I mean, you know, they were almost wards of the state. But that's the first question. The second question is, how do you counter the narrative that, you know, it's not going to go away, but it's an absolute drain on the county's finances in this fiscal times? If you listen to the numbers you hear from the current commissioners and what it's costing the county on a daily basis, how do you counter that? And what would you see yourself being a source to do? What would you do?
Well, it's kind of, Jack, it's kind of ironic that we talk about them not paying the bills, and the residents go down. I term it a little bit as a domino effect. The situation's there, and there's rumors that the people that had run the care center, this lady that was supposedly there before the lady that's presently there, supposedly, I don't know, this will be a fact because nobody will answer me, give me a straight answer, is that she supposedly embezzled money and took money out of the place. And then I was told by people that work there that really trust me, they've told me, now don't you ever say anything because they'll retaliate against her because she still works there, that they were, you know, they now I kind of lost my train of thought, but they were getting the money, you know what I mean? And she come in and she actually physically removed the records from the Crawford County Care Center. Now, can you imagine that? Now, whether this is true or not, I don't know. But I know when we were commissioners, Jack, by golly, that one fellow, you know, that came to all the commissioners meetings that was in the Crawford County jail one time, well, he got over $250,000. Yeah. And there was nothing said to the general public about that settlement, nothing. And that was not right, because the county taxpayers deserve to know what's going on in our county. I don't care what it is. This business about, you know, disclosing everything, and then almost everything that I have been involved with about wanting information, you got to go through the right to know law. And that is a bunch of BS. I'm telling you that people shouldn't have to do that all the time. I mean, I can tell you that we know that when you're talking about real estate or talking about personnel, yes, that's a little bit different story. But after it's settled, by golly, I think them people deserve to know. When I say that, those people, I think it's the residents of Crawford County, whether they're a taxpayer or not, or whether they're 1 year older or they're over 100. If they're a resident here, they deserve to know what's going on in our county government. That's my belief, and you know, I think we just skirt the issue just to make it look good, make it everything look like everything's, you know, hunky dory. Well, it's not all hunky dory at times. It doesn't happen that way.
So, just to follow up on that, so that's like your salient top issue. And when you ran before, the first time you had a beef, I remember, with the MAIC. It was the same kind of theme. You weren't getting, I forget the exact issue, but you weren't getting the information that you went over there to get, which should be public information, that's public money, and you took an issue with that, and that was the sort of key, right? The seed of your candidacy that time.
Yep. Well, and the first 4 years of term, you know, that was a learning experience for me. It certainly was about who's playing the ball and who's not, and who's friends and all that stuff. But I tell you what, I learned a lot of things behind the scenes as far as like you're referring to the MAIC. You know, when I went over there, I wanted to know. I think it was Mr. Turner at that time was the executive director. I said, "How much do you make?" He says, "Well, it's none of your business." I said, the damn heck if it ain't my business. I'm a county commissioner, one thing, and I'm also a taxpayer in this county. I've lived in this county ever since I was day one, and we have a farm out in Salisbury Township, and we pay taxes on it. You know what I mean? Real estate taxes, and I pay my income tax and everything. And so, you know, so that didn't go down good with me when I was told there. And then I couldn't figure out why we didn't buy the junior high right down the street here instead of having to build all new buildings. And then I find out that, well, if we moved it in junior high, that would be big enough that we could have the human services or whatever that department is over there, and they would lose $250,000 or whatever it was, money from the county going over to there to help support Mr. Turner and his secretaries in his office. Now, Jack, that don't make sense. When we could have had that building for a little bit of nothing right down the street, and Mr. Kennedy bought it.
Right.
And I said, well, you know, they said, oh, well, it's going to need all new heating and everything. And I said, well, that's a bunch of baloney. You just do it like any other, like he did. You put individual heat and air conditioners like you get a hotel room. It's pretty elementary.
It's pretty.
Wait. Two things.
Yes.
It's like flashback here. Just a couple years ago, watching these Crawford County Commissioner meetings.
It was. I had a moment there.
Yes. Yeah. The other thing, Sherman, you mentioned the care center, but just looking ahead, what are some other things? I'm sure there's more that you would say, okay, I'm running because of the care center, but here's some other things that I also want to take a look at.
Well, the other thing is I think we ought to really seriously look at the reassessment. I know we talked about it, and that was about because I think the company's name was Barr that had come in and gave us an estimate or something at one time. I don't know whether that was my first term or the second term, but, you know, there's different ways of doing your reassessment than just hiring a company, like, you know, to come in and do it. You can do that in-house. And you can do it, when I say in-house, you just make a policy or an ordinance countywide, and you can't do spot assessment. Right. That's illegal, and I understand that. You just can't go, you know, anybody's property and say, well, you're not paying enough, we're going to do that. Now, I know when the assessment appeals people came in, I can only remember maybe once or twice that the school district ever came in to represent themselves.
Almost never.
No, almost never.
Right.
Because I remember the a lady came from, I think it was Conneaut School District at that time, came in for somebody because they had a policy that if it affected them supposedly more than $250, you know what I mean, I think for that person, well, they would come in. But there was a lot of them that, you know, or I shouldn't say a lot, several of them, and assessment appeals. But, you know, I noticed that certain people seemed to get a blank check when they came in. You know, it was a slam dunk. There was no discussion. And as soon as they left the building, why, my former commissioner there, he would make a motion and tell the other guy to second it, and I'd vote against it. Well, Meadville Tribune never puts in the report who voted what. That just says the county commissioners. I had different guys jump on my case and say, well, you daggone county commissioners, you voted to do this and voted to do that. I said, you don't know what the vote was. Because I said I voted against it on several occasions, but they don't report that, and that's not good. I think they ought to report how the vote went right down the line. I don't care what it is. You know what I mean? Because at that time, not everybody got Armstrong. Now, I don't know about the print, you know, who can get now, but you got to go on. But, you know, you talk about the older generation, they're not into this daggone listening to stuff on their phone and stuff today. Not very many of them. Some of them are pretty efficient, and I think they ought to learn how to do that. I know Active Aging had a program one time where you could go down, and I should have went down, but I thought, well, I'm a young guy back then when they started to have that. I don't need that, you know what I mean? I was like, you know, I don't need that. Well, I darn wish now I would have done that. And I know a lady down there that works at the AT&T office. I got into this situation with her because my phone was acting up and I don't know how to do it. And she said, you know, I've offered my services free of charge and not as an advertisement to different organizations where they could have people come in and she'd tell them how to run their phone, their cell phone. You know, I got so many icons and everything, I can't even, I've asked 4 people to change my phone so I could get more daggone rings, because it rings 4 times.
All right, okay. So one, I think we're going to do an after show with Sherman and Jack. So tune in for that after 11 o'clock. No, don't do that. Mark or Fred? Hey, you have any questions for Sherman?
Have results?
You got results?
Some.
Okay. Well, let's hit those real quick. What do you have, Mark?
There's a number of things that are out on the
We'll come back to you, Sherman.
that are on the county websites. Unfortunately, you have to download them separately, but I know that one of the things that were of interest to a lot of folks were the school board races, and they are starting to come in. There are results for Conneaut and that area, for the Titusville School District and Pencrest, as well as for Crawford. And I'm looking at the Republican ballot at the moment, but we can download the Democratic ballot when you're ready.
Okay. So keep an eye on that, and go ahead and do that, and we'll come back to that. I want to ask you real quick, and this will be back for both Jack and Sherman. Do you start with the races that have the fewer candidates first, or is it just a matter of what you get in terms of numbers that you start applying them to the races, like when you're doing election night?
You want to take it first, though?
Well, I'm not sure. What's the question there?
Well, the
now?
question is, so you mentioned Conneaut?
Conneaut was one, yeah.
Okay, so I was just looking to see here actually how many folks were on that ballot. So when you're factoring and start tallying numbers, are you doing it based off of when they're coming in, or do you start with the races that have the fewest candidates? How do you even start?
Well,
and maybe it's been a while.
I don't know. Well, of course, what I'm concerned with is the county commissioners. I mean, I focusing on that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it'll be. I just was in the courthouse there a few minutes ago, but that was so I could use the restroom before I come
But I'm just
here.
saying when you were a commissioner.
So it's an imperfect system, right? So when we were in there, what we would do is, as things came in, that's the only thing you have to work with, Luke. So it was the numbers came in, as scarce as they might be, you take it with a grain of salt. Don't read too much into the early numbers. But
Right.
As you can see trends developing. The city is like the first one typically that comes in, but then it starts to build, and then you can start to see a trend happening. I think you'd agree with that.
I think that's true.
For the most part.
For
the most part, sure.
Well, Sherman,
really, I didn't take, like Jack's referring to, I really didn't take anything too seriously until you get to almost to the end.
That's right.
Because because I'll tell you what, I know in our township years ago, priest and supervisor, one guy won by 6 votes.
Right.
And he was in office for 6 months, and he left.
Vernon Township, 1 vote.
Yeah.
Separated. Let
Sure.
me ask you a question.
well, it seems like Venango, or the last 10 years, have had a couple coin flips.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there actually have been. Now, it wasn't.
That's crazy.
Yeah, isn't it?
It wasn't
That's crazy.
last election, but
No.
a couple of the local elections came down to a coin toss and a dice throw.
Not joking.
That's interesting.
Right?
There's a woman, I think it was for an auditor position in Indiana County. She had to go to hospital the day of the election, so she didn't vote. And she ended up tying, and then she lost the coin toss.
Oh,
Wow.
You're kidding.
Hey, real
That'd be
quick.
heartbreaking.
Real quick, just to it would lighten it up just a hair. Here's a candidate in Butler County. Adam's going to put it up. This is from earlier. Jack D. Ripper, district judge.
Well, that's a great name.
Jack
isn't
the
it?
Ripper
Jack the Ripper.
is running in Butler County.
That's awesome.
Wow.
So,
Hey,
You get a lot of name recognition there.
yeah.
I got a question.
At least he's not running for coroner.
Related to Phil Goldbright.
So,
Yeah.
Sherm, you're doing this here. Let me ask you a question. Two questions, but how confident are you're going to get the requisite amount of write-ins to run to be on the ballot?
Well, I sure hope it. I mean, I spent quite a lot of money. To be honest with you, I had an ad in the Meadville paper for I don't know how many weeks. Every Saturday in the area shopper, and I made an advertisement for on the TV thing here.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing I didn't get on was I don't think I got anything on with Station 101.7. Chuck Stopp and them. I know I seen them and told them that I was interested in doing that. But I had 2 auctions here back to back, May the 6th and May the 13th, and farm auction, and that's where my dedication had to be. And
Right.
and I only got so many hours in a day, and some of these days get till midnight and get up at 4 and go again. Tomorrow morning I'm leaving at 6 o'clock. So
What's different about this campaign, this ride in particular, the campaign, and the previous one that you waged? I mean, what makes you optimistic now? Is it the issues or?
Well, I think the issues, and I think we have 2 commissioners that are not rerunning for whatever reason, and that's kind of interesting. And the one that is running, I tell you, 3 months ago, Mr. Henry, he was out. I don't know how many municipalities he went to. I think it was around 20 some. He wanted them to raise their $500,000 so that they could have money to keep the ambulance service. Well, some of them stepped up to the plate. I think the city of Meadville, they put it in an ambulance service, and Springboro, they got back in the ambulance service, and Conneautville. And I know some other ones are talking about trying to get them. And I know EMS, I think that those folks have to go through a certain amount of education, to be in an ambulance and to protect the general public. But we need to step up to the plate somehow to help all those folks. Not every fire department has a bar where they can go and supposed to get money. Well, it's pretty surprising how some of those bars that they supposedly are supporting the local fire department, why don't you go ask them how much money they actually give from their bar to that local fire department?
Sherman, real quick, we got to go to break. When do you hope to know for sure? How long do you think it'll take to tally everything?
Well, I don't know how long they're going to be before, what do we got, 67, something like that? I don't know how many different precincts.
Polling, yeah,
huh?
67.
67 precincts, so,
Right.
And I know I talked to one gentleman that was here.
Okay, hey, we have to go to break. And the last question for you, if you don't get those votes, will we see you in the fall?
You're darn right.
Okay.
There you go. Thanks, Sherman. Sherman Allen joining us right in Canada.
Sherman Allen.
See Sherman Allen. We saw him all right with us here tonight in Orange. Our coverage will continue right after this. Well, there's the gazebo in Diamond Park in beautiful Meadville, Pennsylvania. And yeah, we are live here tonight, election coverage. It's primary election 2023. Hey, real quick, a couple big thank yous. I want to thank the city of Meadville here tonight for allowing us to be here in the park. They didn't know what we were going to be doing, so I hope we're earning your trust, and we appreciate it. We want to thank Armstrong. I want to thank Armstrong's Neighborhood Channel, Kevin Tomany and company there. Big thank you for those watching us on Armstrong. Welcome. Final hour here tonight. Polls have been closed for 2 hours. Also want to thank Mike and crew at the Pizza Villa. Make sure you support.
Absolutely
We've been
phenomenal.
talking about local businesses all night. Here's a great one right here. Support them. Great people. And
I'll
food,
vote for them.
Food is fantastic. I know you've been eating all night, so big thanks to everybody at the Pizza Villa. And the weekend's coming up. It's Tuesday, but hey, listen, the weekend is going to be upon us, and there's never a bad time for pizza. So big thanks to Pizza Villa. All right, so.
I don't care where we go. We can't top what we just did.
No. We'll mention
good.
the crew here in a moment because we're wrapping up. This will be our final hour. This has been one of the fastest election night that I think we've had. It's just been great. And there's a lot we really want to dive into. But before we get to that, let's head over to Mark, who's going to share some of the numbers here with us tonight. Mark?
Yeah, and the emphasis is on some. As of about 15 minutes ago, Crawford County started to post some of the numbers that they were getting. And keep in mind, since this is the primary, we have to run down the one side and then run down the other. Right now I have the Republican results up. And among other things, for county commissioner, and this is on the Republican side of the ballot for the primary, the leader as of about 9:45 was Eric Henry with about 940 votes. Todd Seipel at 695, Scott Schell at 845. So those are your three top leaders at the moment in Venango County on the Republican side for the commissioners' spots. For the coroner, and we've kind of talked about this off and on during the evening, the leader there at the moment is Eric Costin with 1,170, followed by Amy Spitzer and Tony Longo. There are results for the auditor, the district attorney. Let's see. And many of the other row offices here, too. I wanted to skip down to some of the school directors' spots because we've been keeping an eye on those. For Crawford County, or Crawford Central, actually, and for Penncrest. Not seeing any results for Titusville just yet. Sort of an outlying area from where we are here in Meadville. But in Penncrest, the leaders there, with a total of about 2,133 votes cast. Just running down the list here. At 306 votes on the Republican side, Brian Custard is the leader. At 295, Ryan Benek.
Mm-hmm.
Is that Ryan Benek?
Mm-hmm.
Michael Chouse at 293. Allison Beers at 262. And I'm running down here. Looks like Randy Styborski. So those look like the five leaders at this point. That's in Penncrest, and that is for the four-year terms.
And by the way, there's obviously some cross-filing there as well.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, this is just a partial at this point. For instance, in Crawford County, this is the Republican side for the four-year seats. And there are a total of 4,329 votes already in. At 563, Ed DeVore is the leader. 561, Ron Irwin. Looking 457, Jeff Rose. 427, Monica Hargenrader. Difficult to see. This is really kind of small. Looks like Dave Biggs. So that looks like the 5 leaders there. Now we can switch to the Democratic side and look at the things there. Let me just get over there.
Hey, while you do that, Mark, real quick, I want to ask Jack. Jack, when you are, I don't know if people were gearing up or expecting, a showdown between two sides for, let's say, school board, for example. There's been, and we'll talk specifically Pencrest because there's been a lot of issues there where you have, two sides kind of battling it out. Are people expecting that here in the primary instead of realizing, okay, that conversation is really going to happen this fall?
I think you're going to see it happening in the fall, largely. I mean,
this is gearing up for that.
This is gearing up. This positioning for that, absolutely. I think that it'll get a lot sharper. It always does. Particularly in school district races, it gets a lot sharper in the fall. And if you take a look at the list, even, if you just go through it, there's a lot of cross-listing going on.
Right.
Right. So I think you'll see a really interesting fall debate. That's going to be something to keep your eyes peeled on. It's kind of like in the case of, the city council folks that came down here, and hopefully we still have time to get the Democrats to come down. They kind of held their punches. I mean, they recognize, it's going to get sharper as it goes along. It'll really kick in at the end of summer. But the quick answer to your question is wait until fall.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And real quick, one thing we don't have a graphic for that we didn't do was Pencrest School District 2-year term candidates, where you're voting for 2. There were 3 candidates who cross-filed: Luigi DiFrancesco, Timothy Brown, and David Valesky. So we don't have a graphic for that, but that's another big race. So somebody is going to be out there.
Exactly.
Okay.
So now, over on the Democratic side for Crawford County, Chris Seeley, the lone Democrat who is declared for county commissioner, he has 1,483 votes. Of course, there's all the row offices. Getting into the school directors. Okay. Now, on the Democratic side, there are some results for Titusville. And the leader there's 143 votes in Titusville for the Democratic side of the ballot for the 4-year school districts. So let's see, 28. Jack D. Roberts is one of the leaders. Jill Neely at 29. At 24, Mark Ross. 22, Carol Schaefer. Let's see. And 21, Lynn Cressman. So probably no surprises there. For Pencrest on the Democratic side, there's 2,251 Democratic votes there that have been posted. The leader there, Allison Beers, Randy Styborski, Scott Stallings, Tiffany Donor, and looks like David McWright. So that's on the Democratic side. But again, as you noted, there's a lot of cross-filing there as well.
100%.
So, Mark, are you? I don't know if you've looked, but you seen anything on the Venango commissioner side?
I have looked, but I have not seen anything yet. I'll check that here shortly. The first results I found were in Crawford County.
Okay, Jack, let me ask you real quick.
Sure.
What are the parties going to take away from tonight? Are you looking at how many Republicans came out, how many Democrats came out to vote, or does that not matter because the numbers are low to begin with for a primary?
Yeah, I think it matters. But, I mean, I think what you're really looking for tonight from a party perspective is the strength of your candidate. When you go into the fall, let's assume, well, that's the easy one, but the low-hanging fruit is the county commissioner's race. Assuming Sherman gets on, you'll have that 4-way, and, it's been traditionally for how many years that the Republicans win out. But on these school boards, that's where I think the really interesting thing is. among other things. That's going to be a very interesting race, and that's where you look at your strength, I think, of your candidate. You know, in terms of the messaging that you send out in the fall. I think you can sort of unmask what the issues are. That'll come very pointed, whether it's curriculum or whether it has something to do with books and those kinds of things, family values, so to speak. So those things will become, I think, increasingly sharp. Look for it. So, you know, if you're on one side or the other, you want that candidate. I think it'll be very outspoken.
It's certainly going to be interesting. I think this fall is going to, or what we're seeing tonight and moving forward, I think it's going to set up a very interesting fall for us, and figuring out how to cover that, which is very exciting to do. You mentioned just kind of looking at the strength of your candidate. I'm sure there are times the parties are going, okay, well, we got to do something. So are we going to see other write-ins then for the fall? Or are they going to say, okay, we've got time to fine-tune some of the things?
I think that you might see some write-ins, but honestly, I think pretty much the die has been cast, right? Pretty much.
Okay.
So let's take tonight. I mean, in terms of messaging, in terms of getting your word out, we're sitting in Meadville, and there's still time, but we've had 2 Republican candidates come here. I'm sure the word's gotten out that, you know, we're here. Come down, visit us, say a few words. We're fond of saying, if you don't talk to us, we'll talk about you. If you're not here.
Get that on a shirt.
But the reality of it is, I think that's important, taking advantage of those opportunities to speak directly to your potential constituent
Sherman's
base.
doing that right now. Can we get
very
a shot of
vocally
that?
behind us.
Yeah, there's a lot of folks behind us dropping off all the ballots from today, and look, he's chasing somebody. The car's moving. Can we get that in focus? The car's moving, and Sherman. Well done.
He's taking door to door to.
I love that guy. I really do.
Car to car. But that's what you got to do sometimes.
I think that we've learned something in politics is that the most vocal get the most airtime, get the most consideration in many cases. So take advantage of those times. The die will pretty much have been cast, and I think they're going to focus on the messaging.
So here's the other thing that I love. You know, all this attention for tonight,
right,
and then it goes quiet for a little bit, right? Yeah. And then
take a deep breath.
Summer hits, especially the latter part of the summer and the fairs.
The fair.
Oh my gosh. And you can just feel it in the air.
Yep.
And it's great.
Yep.
It's great. Like political season has arrived.
Yep.
Well, you know, every time we used to go over for Titusville Day at the Crawford County Fair, I'd slip out for about an hour and a half and just go hang out in the pavilions, scarfing up all the political stuff.
Yeah.
Because
they were also sitting with us.
Everybody's out.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and they did. They came. Everybody came and sat with us.
And it's great. There's just something that's wonderful about it. And again, at the same time, there are times you just kind of go, okay, I'm done. I'm tired of politics, but it sucks you back in.
It sucks you back in. Do you want to hear the best part about it? So when you run like that, you kind of take the deep breath and you take a deep breath and you go back, and then it starts to come. It's kind of like contact sports, like football. That first hit you get when you've signed up, say somebody said you really are, and then you go, okay, it begins.
Right. Yeah.
You get that first hit, and you're back in it.
Is it personal?
It can be. Absolutely, it can be. I think it's a funny thing. A lot of proxy things can be. Like you know a guy real well, and he comes up to you and he says, hey, I'm really supporting your candidacy. I like what I'm hearing. Then you see somebody else's sign on his yard.
Oh, yeah.
And then he'll tell you after the fact, my wife had to support Joe for you. But it can be. I think that the best candidates don't get personal. They don't let it bother them. I mean, if you take a look, call it the Trump model or whatever you want, but the folks that can maneuver and take a hit and keep moving and messaging, I think that's your main.
We saw that with Congressman John Peterson.
John Peterson.
He was very good at that, and that was one of the things that he mentioned early and often when he would come and visit the stream when he was still in office.
Yep.
Is that he constantly lamented the fact that the campaigning became very personal.
Mm-hmm.
When people ran out of issues to talk with, it became deeply personal.
Yeah.
And, you had to develop a thick skin for it. I remember interviewing a congressman in 1980, I believe, in Clarion, and I asked him about his reelection efforts, and he says, Mark, as a congressman, I'm always up for reelection. We run every 2 years. When am I not up for reelection? You know, so for someone who's in the House of Representatives, it's a constant process. You know.
Can I pick on Gavin for just a second?
I suppose.
All right.
He's here.
So earlier I said that I was concerned because Gavin and I had some conversations before he announced that he was running, and one of them was just, hey, be a college kid, and have fun. That had nothing to do with me not thinking he had the ability to do this. I absolutely thought that. I just thought he should enjoy life, and then of course I changed my mind the more I thought of it, because I thought, well, this is great life experience. But I think part of that initial no, don't do it is just that protection of being on junior council.
Right.
You're a student. People are going to show you respect to a degree, right? They're not going to rip into you. And I think part of it was, okay, now you're going to play in the sandbox with everybody, and you're going to lose that outer coating, that protection. But at the same time, I think you're excited about that, aren't you? You want people to challenge you.
Yes, because I think that in the end, I can hold my own, and I have a pretty thick skin. Of course, being a Democrat from Titusville, you've got to. And so far, I've been able to maneuver through that and make it out to the other side.
Yeah, but Jack,
That's amazing.
You've done a lot of campaigns, but again, it might hurt a little less, but as you said, there's still that.
You're all human. I mean, I think.
Yeah.
You're right. After a while, it becomes second nature. It unless it's so cutting and off off limits. Crawford County is a great place because they can throw them, and there's some haymakers, but it's usually above the belt. I mean, very few folks. I know your experience would be, they may not like you and may not like what you have to say, but they're not going to come at you and tackle you below the belt. And that's a good place to be. But I mean, most folks, let's face it, if you're going to get into that arena, you're probably pretty predisposed to take a few cracks and keep on clicking, right? So I don't think it's all that bad. I think social media has distorted a lot of this stuff, but not for the better, by the way.
No, so kind of in that same conversation, though, I think people have sort of found, instead of these two generic, these parties, right? Now you found fractions of the parties, the extreme parts of it. Say, boy, I like what that person's doing. I think I'm gonna be loud and cheerful on this side, and you kind of found these pockets. But how is that going to play a role, and maybe more with the presidential, pulling people together to say we need everybody in the party to vote this way because we don't have the numbers. If we want to put a Republican in the White House or a Democrat in the White House, we need everybody to come together. We can't have all these fractions of the party.
Well, I would say that it depends on the party, too, though. I mean, I think that, let's take the Republicans. I mean, right now, we're looking at the primary on the national level. A lot of strong feelings for one candidate or another. But don't you think, at the end of the day, most of those folks on both sides will come together? I do. I mean, I think they generally do. There's always people, there's going to be a contingent that's not going to support that guy, whether it's a contingent that's formally or informal. They're just not going to support him. But I think for the most part, we are pretty good at closing ranks when it comes down to it. Mark, you've covered a few of these things. I mean,
I have, and I've talked at this where I presently work. I've been interested in following elections since 1968. So, for one...
When were you born?
1784. I've been well known to interview Ben Franklin and Teddy Roosevelt. But at any rate, I've had a lot of interest in this, and
Sure.
I love to look for patterns in these kinds of things. And if there's, it's sad to say, and maybe not, I don't know, but what really pulls people together is a terrible national emergency. For instance, 2001 with 911. when you talk about people closing ranks, I don't think I've ever seen in my own experience, covering news or not, where people closed ranks and became as one. I remember being a resident of the city of Norfolk, Virginia, at about that time, and just I was walking from work one day on a city street, and the fire truck went by with the flag on it, and everybody just stood and turned. Some people saluted, some people yelled, but there was an instant recognition that there were people that would run to the fire, instead of away from it, and that these were the people that we needed to look up to, especially then.
100%.
It is. It's exactly 100%. And when we don't have that unifying force, when there's not that one thing that pulls people together, it becomes very fractured. So I'm not saying we need to have a world war to pull everybody together, but it would certainly help to have something that would unify people, and quiet some of the clamor that's just not doing much good for us.
Yeah, I think, for what it's worth, I mean, Trump did a lot for the Republican Party, but one of the things that was more amazing, whether you liked him or not, was how he maneuvered through the primary.
Right.
With established governors, people that had been around politics for most of their adult life. And whether it was really a lesson in terms of he dismantled his opposition. Was he a good statesman? Probably not. So I mean, it's critically important to pay attention to what people are saying right now, because these are the same people that you'll be voting for real next time through, right? So make sure that the messaging you're getting is the one that you're supporting.
Yeah, think it through.
100%.
Think it through 100%. Vet it very well. Because we kid about every vote counting sometimes, but really it does. Look at the last governor's election, the last senatorial election here in Pennsylvania. Every vote did count, and it sent a message. So, I mean, your words ring very true.
We haven't spent a lot of time. We're hoping to have Eric Henry join us, but the topic of EMS services, obviously that's been a big topic, not just here, but around the nation. Mm-hmm. How you address that, how you fund it, what ideas you have. I mean, the importance of it, I don't think anybody would deny, having that service available is important and every second counts. But what are you hearing? What are some thoughts that you have with this conversation? Are we not hearing enough of this conversation, or are we hearing too much of it? Thoughts? We'll start at the end with Gavin, because he's been involved with some of these discussions.
Yes, it's certainly a big issue that people in Titusville specifically are concerned about. We rely heavily on EmergiCare in Titusville, and oftentimes they'll be out running a different call or doing transports and won't be available immediately to come up and respond to any number of situations. And so one of the current ideas is that our fire department would staff an ambulance that would be kept at our fire station. And that way they could have it as a backup in case EmergiCare was not available to respond. Now, there are obviously some strengths and weaknesses in something like that, right. But I think moving forward, continuing to put a focus on our public safety, and particularly on the issue of EMS, will be crucial.
Have you guys looked at the costs for that, even preliminary? Is that something that you've come out in favor of, or?
That's something I certainly support working something out with EmergiCare to keep an ambulance at our fire station. Initially,
I think that's what's happening.
Yes. Now it's been moving slowly. Initially, the plan was to purchase and equip our own ambulance to keep there, but as things continue to move forward, again, we all face the issue of cost, especially right now. So,
right.
Yeah.
Now in Venango County, it's really reached ahead in the last year or so. There have been 2 county-wide conversations involving emergency preparedness personnel, And it's been, at least from what I've seen, it's gotten some mixed reviews, the ideas about having some sort of a county-wide service, while people who are in the business are fearful about what that will do to the integrity of their service. There are others who are, saying, well, we need to do something because we just don't have the volunteers. There are major concerns about the whole thing from top to bottom. Do we have a larger volunteer force? How do we fund a larger paid ambulance? Do the counties or do the municipalities kick in? The good part of it is at least there is a conversation at this point. Not everybody is agreed, and I think they will probably move toward a county-wide effort of some sort. I mean, they're going to have to, but there are a lot of issues like response times. Where do we keep centralized, responding units? Which ones and who and how often, and how do we make compensation and things like that? There's a lot of moving parts to this, but the one thing that's real is that the pool of people to draw from to man the volunteer services is declining. It's not getting any stronger, and something really needs to be done about that. And having some sort of a county-wide response probably makes sense in the long run.
On that thought, Mark, I would say this. I think it begs the discussion: what constitutes critical infrastructure? And that's a really good question, and that would go a long way to decide on how you fund this thing, what kind of structure it has, that kind, you know what I mean? It has, is that something that should be the discussion at the county level? What's the county level even mean? Is that something in the political ranks, in the courthouses? And so, I mean, I think we've seen this coming for a very long time. It's not getting better. There's no indication that it will get better. And I think it's a good to preempt that. It's too critically important that, you let it slide until you're losing people. So I think that we're going to find ourselves very quickly deciding what is indeed critical infrastructure. How do we fund that? That's always the question, right? And if you take a look at the demographics of places like Crawford County, they continue to lose people, but that doesn't tell the whole story. Who's left? The population is older.
Exactly. And
do you know what I mean?
That's what's happening throughout, if you will, Rust Belt, Pennsylvania.
100%. And Northeast Ohio and elsewhere. I mean, so, yeah, that's a critical issue. I think that's going to be something that will be, it's here now. It's in the discussion phase. But in the next 5-6 years, you'll see something, I think, very different on the landscape in terms of how we deal with it.
And funding it is going to be a very critical issue. I know some folks that I've spoken with are in favor of, raising taxes somewhat to do that, and some people are willing to pay that. But there's others who are on, of course, fixed incomes and what have you, and, anything is going to be a hardship.
One of our businesses in Ross Township, which is in Allegheny, we got basically a notice that's saying, hey, this authority, fund the Ross Volunteer Fire Department. I mean, every business gets one. It's 1 to 25 employees, 25 to 50, and so forth. It's not a lot, but it's a darn good idea. We'll support it. I think you're going to see more things like that. I think you will. And I know Eric took some heat, Commissioner Henry, because he, of course, has Meadville Ambulance. But I mean, his point is well taken.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The thing is there's a number of different approaches, and trying to find which one is going to be best for a given area is going to take a lot more discussion than what we've currently seen.
It's interesting, and when you look at this conversation, I'm sure it's difficult. You're a public official, but you have a business. Yeah. And this came up a little bit, I think, in Titusville, and I think the solicitor basically said, should somebody abstain when it comes to something that's related to their business? And the solicitor was like, tell me something that doesn't pertain to some. I mean, everybody's impacted somehow with every decision that's made. So you can't all just step away and say I'm not going to vote on it. So it's certainly interesting, and you just I don't know if there's a proper answer or solution to that, but
you're going to find out.
You're going to find out.
It's something that's going to be increasingly threadbare,
especially since it is such an essential service. You know, that's going to be critical.
All right, we're going to take I think our final timeout. We'll regroup here, come back, and wrap things up from Diamond Park in Meadville. It's been a beautiful night. It's been a great night. We want to thank all our guests for coming by and joining us. But we still have another half hour to go. And we'll be back here. Look at that shot.
Fantastic.
We'll be back right after this. And welcome back. A beautiful courthouse in Crawford County. And we are live Diamond Park, Meadville, Pennsylvania. Primary election coverage 2023. I want to thank those who joined us here this evening. I want to thank those who are still with us here tonight. We've got Jack Lynch, we've got Mark Heim, we've got Gavin Griffin with us here this evening. Looking at commissioner races, school board races. Mark mentioned the row offices that we have, and just because we don't have a graphic doesn't mean that they're any less important. We just thought there's so many things going on that we would kind of focus this conversation on certain things, and really it's just the start, because what happens here tonight is as these lists get whittled down, we're going to have a better idea of what fall's going to look like. Luke Rio, Jack Lynch, Mark Heim, Gavin Griffin. All right. So far, thoughts tonight, Jack?
Overall, I think the biggest thing that affects anything race-wise is the lack of participation. If we get 20%, that'd be a surprise. Unfortunate. Like I said, we've said a couple of times tonight, these are the folks closest to you that make decisions that affect you probably the greatest, both in terms of your fiscal impact as well as what your school guide, your policies for your school, your children. I mean, these are huge races. You can't say any better than the two candidates for city council. We have to be more neutral in terms of party because we're very close. It's a small community. Here's what I think. That's what they're telling you, and that matters. Those were my thoughts. Before we handicap anything, Mark, you had some other.
Well, not so much on all of the things that we spoke about, but on the results. When you look at some of the lists of the candidates on the ballots that we've seen, this has certainly been a winnowing night, where the number of candidates on many of the school boards that we've covered tonight are going to be cut in half to a quarter. And I think, as you talked about issues before, the issues now will come into sharper play. Right now, it's more of a popularity contest, or who can shout the loudest. Sorry, it seems to me that's kind of what it comes down to at some points. But from here on out, the issues are going to be more sharply focused. We're going to hear more about the things that are dividing certain parties, certain issues, certain groups, what have you. It's going to get louder, not softer, and we're going to see more of it. For those that wish it would go away, it isn't going away.
It never does.
Never does.
Gavin, do you feel the sense of excitement as this is your first campaign?
Yes.
Do you feel that excitement, but at the same time, do you also feel like, okay, this is just the start? Like now there's, depending on what happens and the results you get over the next week or so, what does that do for you in terms of your plans for fall?
Well, I certainly feel the excitement. I don't know whether will build as we continue to get results in, but I can tell you that I will continue to work hard and go out at door to door and meet people. And it's just the tip of the iceberg, but I'm certainly ready for the road ahead.
Jack, I kind of get a sense, even just trying to reach out to people tonight to join us, that. Even though here they are, here's the list of candidates, and 20 pages of candidates for Crawford County positions, and you've got 4 pages of Venango County here, things that we haven't even talked about, Franklin City Council and Emlenton and Cranberry and Oil City and all this stuff. I get a sense that there's it's the calm before the storm. Yeah. Like, hey, it's great that you guys are covering this, but.
Exactly. Yeah, I think
come see me this fall.
I think that's exactly right. Historically, that's been right for us on this program. I mean, it's a couple things have changed. It's historically true that the primaries, you're not going. I mean, it is what it is. things do heat up, but here's a couple other things to consider. It seems to me that a couple of things, at least in Crawford, have changed. One is the primacy of the headquarters. I don't think, for example, the Democratic headquarters even opened up tonight. I mean, they're there. I mean, they've got the address. And I would say as well that the Republican headquarters doesn't hold sway like it did in my time in terms of the people. That was the place to be, see and be seen. I mean, everybody was there. Back in the day that, the numbers rolled in on a fairly regular basis. I mean, in real time, pretty much as they were coming out of this building behind me over to headquarters. So that's changed. And the other thing that's changed, and I could be wrong, but is this sort of post-pandemic reluctance. Things have changed a little bit. Maybe they'll go back. It's hard to say. But I think the proof in the pudding, Luke, will be this fall to see if things sort of reemerge, both at the headquarters, we'll see about that, as well as the engagement that we get. And like we are fond of saying, you can come here and talk with us, or we'll talk about you in your absence. But the reality of it is most people that run for office aren't shy around microphones, right? So there's something that's at work, I think, in a larger context here.
One of the things that I noticed in the process of looking up numbers tonight is that on the state level, a lot of the mail-in ballots had already been counted. I don't know if that was completed, but it showed tens of thousands of mail-in ballots already counted in many counties. So it was able, you were able to get some sense of what, mail-in.
As opposed to previously, in previous primaries, you're saying that the numbers seem...
I hadn't seen it before. That doesn't
Okay.
mean it didn't happen, but I was a little bit surprised, maybe taken aback, that there were already mail-in ballots that were vetted and counted. Maybe I shouldn't have been surprised because maybe they have a different, deadline. Not sure, because there's yet to be counted. There's going to be provisional ballots. There's going to be military ballots,
Right.
things like that have not come in yet. And there's two different kinds. There's a no excuse ballot, and there's an actual absentee ballot. And the only distinction that was made on the Pennsylvania Department of State website tonight is they were called mail-in ballots. So I don't know if all the absentees have been, actually been counted absentees for folks who are physically unable to make it to a polling station, as opposed to mail-in ballots that were just a no excuse, this is the way I want to vote, and I'll mail it in, 2, 3, 4 weeks early. But a lot of those results were already in. We did have some discussion about, how long is it going to take to know all these results? I still think it's going to take, 7, 10 days or whatever to get everything counted and certified. It usually does, but it seems like the mail-in ballots are well underway.
Do we know, in terms of write-ins, where we're seeing, we know, Adam, let's pull up Crawford County Commissioners for a moment.
Typically on write-ins,
so we don't have C. Sherman Allen on there. He's
Right.
obviously a write-in. So we've got that. Let's go to Titusville City Council. And there is 5. Gavin, I think you've got Gary Thomas, former police chief, John Fry, who's a former councilman. You've got Tom Chatham. You also have the current mayor, John Crouch, doing a write-in campaign, and Jay Corkland,
Yes.
who's currently sitting on council, who filled an empty seat. He's, I think, been in that position for a month and a half, 2 months.
Yeah, something like that.
Something
yeah.
like that.
Wow.
So, you've got those folks doing a write-in campaign. So, yeah, there's going to be a lot of work over across the street tallying all this up, because they're going to want to make sure they get it right.
and we're not going to know that until they actually, open all them up and take a look at them.
And it was,
course.
almost 2 weeks? Jack, do you remember, was it 2 weeks back in the fall election? The
Yeah,
general
there's a
election?
date certain you have to have your election certified.
Yeah.
But it was a full complement of 2 weeks, which is generally the case. Yes.
Okay. Then, yeah, not only do they have that deadline, but they also want to make sure it's done right and they don't miss anything,
Right.
especially with everything that's been going on the last handful of years. And Jack, you know, a lot of effort goes into making sure that there's
100%.
nothing that goes wrong here or in Venango County. So, yeah, there's a lot of pride, I think, and it comes down to testing the machines a month or two out, right? That takes a lot of work.
It's the elections office has a full-time. I mean, they're not sitting on their hands. It's a year-round. You don't think of it in those terms, but it's a year-round job. And once those things are put away in the fall, they're taken out. They never really are out of operation. They're being calibrated. For the next time that when the candidates are fed into the thing, they're tested. I mean, there's a whole protocol that goes into this thing. Can't speak to anywhere else in terms of how it's done, but I have great confidence in Crawford County in terms of the protocols that are in place. I mean, it's phenomenal.
As a reporter, I actually attended a couple
right.
of occasions in Venango
That's right.
County as well, and I was satisfied beyond a shadow of a doubt about the election integrity at the local level. Those that talk about a rigged election certainly don't live around here.
Mark, great care is taken on every mail-in ballot. They're adjudicated one by one. I mean, there's sometimes some were pretty crazy, but I mean, you're going literally through each one. I mean, it's not just and so we had great when we signed off on those things, like I'm sure the boards of commissioners today, that you're solid. I mean, you're.
What was the most comical name you ever ran across?
Mark Hyam.
Okay, I'll buy that for a nickel. I walked into that.
No, we
one.
got
Superman.
I think we had a couple Superman, one Batman. It's just there were some you can't say on a family-friendly show.
But here's the reality. One, you're throwing away I get you might not have any idea, so you're just writing somebody in.
Right.
But the other thing is, even you think it's a joke, they still have to treat it in a serious manner.
They do.
Exactly.
So it takes up more time when you do that.
Is that Super J-Man?
Yeah, we saw some doozies, and people they do stuff like that for whatever motivates them. But yeah, you're right. It takes the same amount of time as it was, to go through and review all those.
Gavin, you were looking at some numbers. Anything catch your attention?
Pop up?
I was looking at Titusville. I'll have to.
Which also
reload
had
there.
some Meadville, I think, towards the top.
Yes, we were looking at
It looked like
Meadville.
maybe 23.8%
Mm-hmm.
in for Meadville, and you have Autumn Vogel with 696 votes, Larry McKnight 675 for a total of 1,371. Unresolved write-in 62. And then about 28.7% of Titusville City Council 2-year term. Gavin Griffin, 206 votes, 6 unresolved write-in, 2-year term. Are you doing 2-year term?
Yes. So
Okay.
not too bad.
There you go. So, what did these folks learn tonight, Jack? And again, tonight is going to set up the fall.
Right. As always.
As always.
So, nothing's too surprising at this point. There's a sort of a script that's been in place for a very long time. Let's start with this. Write-ins are very hard to do on the county level. Sherman Allen is endeavoring to do something that he knows is a tough call. We'll see where it takes him. If he gets on the other hand, he's 1 of 4. Right?
So, a positive to that, he is known.
He is very well known.
He sat in that position before.
Right, for 8 years.
So, less work to do in terms of name recognition.
So he's got a little bit of a boost there, but still difficult, right? Yeah. The other big takeaway is, and unfortunately, I mean, you've got very important offices behind us in the courthouse that are uncontested from the Democratic side. You take a look at things like the sheriff, the coroner. You've got 3 candidates on the Republican side for coroner, 0 on Democrat. I mean, even if you ran on that side of the ticket, you'd most assuredly be there in the fall, right? So
Exactly.
That's an interesting. Yeah, as a Democrat, I mean, that's exactly right. I mean, you've got some time to mess. Have they been successful historically? No. But by the same time, I think we suffer a little bit when we don't have that conversation. And there's, by the way, there's been some really good, very good Democratic candidates on that have run for countywide offices that just the sheer numbers didn't perhaps make it, but they made a lot of sense and they resonated.
Well, and again, as all of us have actually pointed out at one time or another during the evening, is at the local level, the D and the R does not matter as much.
Once you get in there, it's not as big as you might think it is. Mm-hmm. That's right.
Yeah, but there's been some subtle tones. Doing politics now is a lot different than it was 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago.
100%.
I mean, you and again, not to take away from the folks involved, you're talking about well-oiled machines that I think because of time, interest, as those party people start to disappear, the strength of those parties is sort of fracturing a little bit. You mentioned not seeing people at headquarters.
Right.
Republican, Democrat, that was the place to be. Election, primary election night, general election night.
Oh yeah, primary.
You were there.
Yeah,
either there or you were down, where they were counting the votes.
Well, but no, you were at headquarters because they were sending the results to the parties.
Yep.
So it was a gathering place. You were having fun. It was a great time, great vibe. That stuff's slowly going away.
Yeah,
we're not. It's empty. It's empty. Times are changing. So when you say traditionally it's been this type of candidate to fit these positions, I don't know. I don't think we can say that anymore. I think the landscape's changing.
Maybe the next election program that we do should be at the post office.
Sure.
I don't think it's open this time of day. I think they shut the offers.
Yeah.
They'd charge us an extra stamp, I'm sure.
Can I just mention for the 800th time that it has been a beautiful night. It's been beautiful to be out here. This has been fantastic. The backdrop, look at that. That's just...
It's a real coup. I mean, weather-wise and otherwise.
What's going on right now in there, Jack? Give us a behind-the-scenes look.
So what's happening is the deliveries are coming in. Probably the most of them are here by now. Might be a straggler or two. And they're
from the outskirts?
Yeah, they're usually, I'm sure they're all in by now. I mean, there might be somebody. But so those, you come in, you have the contents of your bag, you drop them off on the table, you take your rolls back, you do the roll thing at the commissioner's desk, you give the numbers, the totals, that's the seal, there's a seal on that. And then the machines are taken downstairs, and they're all set up in one of the two rooms, probably in the meeting room. And basically they start to go through, and then they give the unofficial tally. Of course, that doesn't include anything that they don't have in their possession. But everybody looks forward to getting this day over with. So the sooner that, believe me, it's a long day. It starts at 6 in the morning on average and ends whenever it ends. So they're trying
organized
to get some
chaos.
It's sort of like an organized chaos. I'll have to say the folks that do it in workmanlike fashion. It's a lot of fun. It's draining.
It can be a lot of fun.
And they want to make sure that, and it sounds pretty canned, but a quality product at the end of this thing, like something they can hang their hat on. Yeah, here's what the numbers look like tonight. Right.
And I've seen that as soon as 11:30.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen it at the county level as late as say 2:30.
Right. Yeah.
It just depends on whether or not it's a general election during a presidential year or if it's like tonight.
Right.
Hopefully these folks will have everything wrapped up and gone home by 11:30.
Yeah, I would say that's probably a good possibility.
All right, let's kind of get everybody's final thoughts before we do some thank yous here tonight. And Gavin, we'll go with you. It's been a long day for you.
Yeah, I started at about 6 this morning, and I was at the polling place in Titusville all day long. Had some good conversations with people, and I look forward to moving on to November. And I think our strongest message is that the future belongs to young folks like myself, the vigorous and the idealistic, but it also requires the help of all our residents, people within our community, stepping up to do the right thing.
Wow, did you actually
That's pretty good.
map that out, or was that,
That,
top of your head?
top of my head. Luke, I'm running on about 4 hours of sleep,
I
so
know,
that
that's-
was like,
That's pretty good.
That's good.
I have to
Hey,
say.
Mark, beat that.
Not anymore.
see.
There was a time I could do that.
We'll get your final thoughts here, though, tonight. Obviously, some important races, and again, I think people are just sort of waiting to see how tonight goes before the real excitement begins.
I was just very pleased to be invited back tonight. It's something that fascinates me endlessly. I studied political science in college also, so I'm one of those folks. I'm constantly looking for patterns to all of this, why people vote the way they vote, what kind of issues draw them, all of those kinds of things. And I will tell you also, one night I had nothing better to do than to analyze the door-to-door campaign of Lee, help me, in Venango County.
Arlie James?
Arlie James. And what I found out was in his door-knocking campaign from the southwest of Venango County to the northeast, every door that he knocked on, that was his vote. And that's how he won his initial election. So continue with your door knocking. That's a good thing. The personal contact, and that's another thing to look for, is how well people, make contact. There's so many things that go into elections and politics, the science, the mechanics, and it's endlessly fascinating for me to be around it.
Jack?
I'll just close by saying here that just looking at the commissioner's race, I'll just say, for example, you've got 5 good candidates, 1 incumbent, and the rest are challengers. I think you might see a surprise. I think it's very possible, without any kind of forward knowledge, I think that just based on history here and in terms of the farm vote, whoever would capture the that constituency will be successful in terms of being on the ticket. And I think we might see a surprise on that level. And I think the rest of the races, you got strong candidates. We've said many times they're critically important races because they're the ones closest to you, and those count the most, believe it or not, in terms of your pocketbook, your issues, your children's school. Like I'll echo what Mark said here tonight is I'm grateful to be here. I think we're going to see some sharper contrasts to talk about in November.
Yeah.
And I look forward to that discussion as well.
Gentlemen, thank you for your time tonight. I want to thank all those who joined us this evening. We had a chance to try something different tonight, and there's some notes we jotted down and some things we need to work out. But outside of that, it's been great being here. Again, the weather's a little different in November, so we may be back in the studio. But, Jack, I'm sure you're going to be
out and about.
But we'll figure out something because this has been fantastic
it's
to
wonderful.
do. So,
we lucked out, too. The
weather's perfect. Big thanks to the folks at the city building, the city of Meadville. Thank you so much. Armstrong, Kevin Tomney, thank you so much for your support, and we look forward to seeing you all back here this fall.
Yes.
6 months away, huh?
And the guys behind the camera?
We're going to get to them right now. We want to thank our entire crew. We have Adam Bodemer, who's producing, helped set up, running everything for us. Thank you, Adam. Greatly appreciate it. I also want to thank Sam Rio and Nolan Rio. Nolan's got the mobile camera here tonight, which has been kind of cool to see. So from all of us, Stream Television and Armstrong's Neighborhood Channel, thank you. And if you went out to vote today, thank you for doing so. Hopefully you get out and vote this November. That's going to wrap up our coverage here from Diamond Park in Meadville, Pennsylvania.